Shields up, Iron Breakers, and welcome back to another episode of the Kast. And today I have with me Darth Microtransaction. How are you doing, sir?
Doing good. Good morning. And to yourself, how are you doing?
Like I already told you right before the recording, I'm in excruciating pain from something that I did yesterday. You want to know the actual movement that I did that messed me up?
Yeah. What's the lore behind the show?
I was just like stretching. Like that was it.
That's it.
I stretched. And I pulled something, and yeah, I went to the doctor this morning, and she was telling me like, oh yeah, this is like some stress injury. This was going to happen to you no matter what you did. It just happened to be that stretch. You could have literally been sleeping and wake up in excruciating pain out of nowhere. And I was like, that's great to know. You know, the joys of getting old, basically.
That's a durability injury. It's like you got to repair the gear, you know? It's like it finally broke.
Well, at least we don't have to deal with those in Path of Exile too, because gear doesn't break there. So
true. That would be ugh.
I wanted to get started by asking, what is your origin story? Because I kind of know the first time that I ran into your content, but I'm curious to know what I've missed before we jump into
my very
Path of
first
Exile.
origin would be from my mama. I spawned into Alaska. But I'm assuming you mean origin from like when I started YouTube.
Yeah, when you started like YouTube, or just gaming in general, wherever you would like to get started.
Sure. Well, for gaming in general, I'll answer that portion of it first. I started because I watched my dad and brother play video games. So when I was younger, I would, watch my dad play games like Myst, Super Metroid, Descent, stuff like that. And it was a big part of like my earlier years, like until I was 5, 6 years old or something like that. I'd watch my dad play these games, and then I watched my brother play games, and I got old enough to play games myself, and I just kind of naturally fell in love with it. So the concept of like watching other people play video games was something that was very innate to me at younger years. And then as far as content goes, it wasn't really like an on-purpose thing. It was I was playing a game on my phone called Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes, and I saw some ad for it during Christmas, and I was kind of spending Christmas with the family, and I was a little bored, so I like downloaded an app on the phone, and I started playing it, and I was trying to explain something. I forget exactly what my first video was, but I was trying to explain some build or something in the game, and then I kind of kept explaining other things in the game, and then it just kind of grew into a channel, and here we are years later, I suppose.
I think I remember my old boss at TGN. I think he used to play that. That's like one of those, kind of like Raid Shadow Legends, right?
It's a hero collector.
Yeah.
It's actually pretty fun. It's like a fragmental hero collector as opposed to like you pull the full character out of a shard or whatever like they have in Raid. You would like go and you would farm nodes and get pieces of the character, and eventually you'd lock them in full.
Yeah. Like I said, my old boss used to play that stuff. He'd be into all of that mobile jank type of stuff.
Yeah.
So you got started with mobile gaming when it came to your content creation, which inevitably led you to the game where I became aware of your content because I was an avid hater of this game. Can you guess what game that was?
I'm assuming Raid Shadow Legends. Tons of people hate the game.
Interesting. You did content for Raid Shadow Legends?
Yeah, I would say that's probably one of the most notable games I've covered. I covered it for literally years. That was the game directly after Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes. I played that one. Because I saw a buddy of mine who was actually my YouTube mentor, who kind of like taught me the ropes, and I have nothing but respect and love for the man. Mobile Gamer, he did an ad for it, and I was like, well, I'm kind of bored again. Here's another ad for another game. Download the game, see what I like. And then, I always kind of a little bit of a dopamine enjoyer. So I just, you pull it, what do I get? I get some shiny character, and I just kind of kept playing it from there. But yeah, I'm assuming if it's not Raid, then it's going to be Diablo Immortal. Like, people hate Diablo Immortal also.
There it is. Yep. Like, when they announced Diablo Immortal, I kid you not, I must have made, I think, a 7 video series on my channel just being mad about the game, which I still am, by the way. I still am very
fair
mad.
Enough. I mean, you and everyone was a hater at the point. I get it. It was it's like those channels that do like the fall of Mr. Beast, and they'll make like a dozen videos in a row with the same title thumbnail, like he's fallen off or whatever. One of those channels. I've seen plenty of these types of videos that hate on him more though, and I mean I get it. I don't got no counter argument. Yeah, it's pay to win the shit.
It's just funny because like that is not my channel at all. Usually I cover Dark Souls and Monster Hunter. That's my bread and butter. So like Elden Ring, Souls likes, those types of games. that's the stuff that I focus on. But Diablo's always held a very special place in my heart because I used to play the crap out of Diablo 2. And
Yeah.
then when Path of Exile came out, the original one, I had to make a choice. I was like, okay, I'm the type of guy that's like, no, I want to play one game. I don't want to be playing one, two, three, four games at the same time. I have memory bank for one game, and so at any given time, I'll be playing one game. And if I'm playing another one, I need to put the second one on hold or on like maintenance mode or something, and then I focus on the other one. And it's like that's the way I roll. So when it came time to choose, I'm like, well, I love Diablo. So having to choose between Diablo 3 and this kind of like unknown game, Path of Exile, I chose Diablo 3, and I've kind of regretted that choice ever since because Diablo 3's story was absolutely terrible. The gameplay eventually got better with Reaper of Souls, but it was still like, you know,
What didn't you like about this story in Diablo 3?
I mean, if you've played Diablo 2, right? And this, I don't remember a lot of it at this point, but like the one thing that I remember really always stood out to me is if you've played Diablo 2, especially as many times as I did, like I would have my friends boost characters for me, I would boost characters for them, we'd all like rush through acts and do all that stuff, like in the original Diablo 2, now remastered, right? And so it was always this thing about you going out and you picking up the soul stones, and if you've played Diablo 1, you know that, you know, the soul stone of Diablo, he puts it in his head and then he becomes the wanderer in Diablo 2,
The
all of this stuff.
warrior, yeah.
There's a big importance given to the soul stones. And I remember that you finish Diablo 3 and the soul stone just falls to the ground, nobody cares. And I was like, what do you mean? The soul stone is the most important thing. What do you mean you're going to leave the soul stone there? There's no follow-up in the story for the soul stone. Then you have Deckard Cain getting killed off by a no-name villain that nobody even remembers. I mean, I remember because I'm spiteful about it. It's Magda, the butterfly lady. And it's just like there's a bunch of stuff in that story that just doesn't make sense and kind of like takes away a lot of the good things that you have in the Diablo 2 lore, right? And so that was one of the aspects of it. And then eventually Diablo 4 came out. In Diablo 4, I actually like the story. I like the campaign. I think that the campaign of D4 is actually really good. But
Yeah, I agree.
then Blizzard stole my season pass through a dark pattern. I was one of those guys.
Oh, you misclick with the controller. You do the thing where
Yeah.
like highlight. Yeah. Yeah, that
I mean,
that needed to get solved pretty soon.
my video got like I made a Twitter thing and it was like 4 million views and there was 3 of the developers in there in that thread saying, yeah, this shouldn't have happened. And I was like, well, there's 3 of you guys here saying that this shouldn't have happened, and you never did anything to do right by the people that lost their season pass.
Yeah,
Like that
yeah,
just I was pretty pissed off about that. But
I
going
remember that. Yeah.
so like now you can kind of understand why Diablo Immortal like really rubs me the wrong way because I've always been a massive Diablo fan. And you know, you see the way that Blizzard's just like, yep, this is just straight. I called it a skin job, which basically it was. It's just NetEase.
Well, it was ripped from a different mobile game and built over the backs of like a different mobile game, basically.
Yeah.
I forget exactly the name of it, but yeah, it was essentially a reskin.
And then you have Wyatt Chang coming out and saying like, oh, but it's you can't really buy gear, and it's like, I mean, technically, I guess if you don't count the gems, which is the most important and power giving thing as gear, sure. Because at the time, I was like, look, I know I'm gonna hate this game, but I'm not the kind of person that's just gonna go and hate a game without playing it. So I wanted to know exactly what is going to be wrong with this. So I actually played it. I played the whole thing, all of the content that was available at launch. I finished the game, and
What
then
do you think of the story in that one? Since you're kind of a story enjoyer.
it was terrible. I didn't like it at all. I don't even
like the
remember
story?
it.
Okay.
No, it was so bad. I didn't even remember what the story was.
Right.
But the thing to me was more so just overall the mechanics, because there were a lot of people at the time that would say, but beneath all of these microtransactions, there's actually a good Diablo game here. Would you say that that is fair?
Yeah, actually, I would. Like, I think the reality is if you removed the resonance system, which in particular is the problem point around the game, because that is where all the pay-to-win aspects come in. If you remove the resonance system, keep the cosmetics, because who gives a fuck, then the game is legitimately actually, like, arguably better than Diablo 4. Like, the PvP is actually, like, kind of fun. To be honest, it's just completely unbalanced, and the MOBA style gameplay is actually pretty fun. They have a lot of different game modes they continue to add in were pretty fun. Like, did you play Fractured Planes?
No, I just played, like I said, I played all of the content that was there at the beginning, and then at the end of that, I immediately deleted my character and uninstalled everything, never touched it again. 'Cause I
Okay, so you
hated it.
didn't. Yeah, fair enough. I understand. So you didn't really get a chance to engage with a lot of the in-game systems.
No, no, no.
I would actually say the gameplay loop in the in-game was actually fairly enjoyable. Like the farming in the game was fairly fun. I thought the PvP was pretty good when it was balanced. It has a decent clan system where there's actually a reason to have a clan and have strategy and interact with each other. And the Shadows versus the Immortal section of the game was actually pretty well thought out. So that's kind of, as much as it might sound like there's some things I'm praising about it, it almost makes it a little bit more sad because there are good things about the game, but none of it really matters because all of the systems are influenced again by the resonance system they've chose to add into the game, which effectively removes the integrity out of systems that otherwise would have really mattered in terms of strategy and gameplay and time invested into the game. Even if they left the resonance, but you couldn't buy the legendary gems, the grinding of the resonance and making it would have actually made it one of the better mobile games. And I've played my fair share of these games, and I would say it's actually in its core is a fairly decent game that has been completely ruined by greed, effectively.
I don't agree with you on a lot of things, and that I don't want to spend too much time on Diablo Immortal, right? But I will give
Sure.
you the clan bit. The clan bit, I remember seeing how clans worked and how it functioned. I was like, this is actually kind of cool. That part I remember was kind of cool, even though I didn't interact with it that much because, like I said, I was just like rushing through. I just want to see the story. I want to see the mechanics, and I don't like any of this. I didn't really like the gameplay. I'm one of the people that would actually say, I don't think there's a great Diablo game under there, but I
Sure.
understand why you would say there is, but it wasn't really for me, basically. And it just kind of like solidified my absolute hatred of that game. But I have a tendency.
We probably have different
Yeah,
experiences because, I didn't play Diablo 1 and Diablo 2. So I didn't come into it with some preconceived notion of what the
yeah,
game was supposed to be. I came from it from, I was playing other games, mostly MMORPGs. And then my channel was covering mobile games, but I was mostly an MMORPG enjoyer in which long-term grind and, exponential experience was something that I'm like fairly used to in this. And that's basically how they cap you out on the game. And so for me, it was a similar experience to some of the MMORPG systems I ran into, and I thought that was kind of good. Plus, there's a different barrier, in my opinion, in terms of the quality of these games I realistically expect when they're essentially mobile games. Like very
yeah.
often I'll look at them and be like, it is a decent mobile game to play on your phone or something.
I'll give them one thing is that at the very least they released a PC client because I only played it on PC. I was like, that's the only reason I even played it is because it's on the PC. Fine, I'll play it on PC because I was never going to play it on mobile because I don't like touch interface. I need to feel
Sure.
tactile, like mouse clicks, keyboard, or button presses on controller. Most of the games I even play on controller.
Sure.
I forget if I played that on controller. I think it had controller support. I probably did play it on controller as well. But yeah, it's like, Diablo Immortal, I hated it, but that's kind of like how I became aware of your content because after I was done with it, I was still curious to see how it was going on. So you'd be reporting on it, and I'd be like, okay, let me check what's going on with that trash. Let's just see what's going on. So it was kind of like that's how I kept up with it. But then when Diablo 4 came out, would you say that that's kind of like when your channel really popped off? Because I was like, man, DM is doing fantastic content. He is doing friggin' phenomenal. I'm so happy he's not covering mobile games anymore so that I can watch without guilt.
Sure. I mean, yeah, with Diablo 4 came a lot of exposure because I believe people like yourself exist that still obviously have a place of Diablo in their heart and they want to like go back and see what's going on with something that they remember a lot.
Yeah.
Like for me, I'm obviously a giant RuneScape fan. If they came out with RuneScape 4, I'm immediately going to consume all content related to that because it's just a spot for me that I hold dear. So like I can understand why I saw a lot more exposure than I had seen previously. It wasn't just me though. Like, a lot of the Diablo creators,
Oh yeah, like
pretty much exploded. So
Rax. I remember at the time it was like Rax, Woody Joe, and those are just two names that instantly pop up. But I remember more people were popping off at the time as well
yeah,
with
tons of people. Yeah.
with doing content and whatnot. How do you feel about the current state of D4? Because I haven't been able to. I'm just like you took my friggin' season pass token. Like you literally
Sure.
pretty much reached into my wallet. I'm not gonna give you any more money. Like I'm done with you.
Sure. I mean, I don't think it's that bad of a game. I think realistically, what happens is D4 bad is basically true on launch. It has become better. I don't think it is what people wanted it to be, which was basically like Diablo 2 remastered again. I think effectively is what
Yeah.
people wanted. Like they wanted the new version of D2, and that is not what people received. They basically received a game that is Diablo in name, marketed towards as big of an audience as possible. And because of that, they're not really focusing on niching down and reclaiming the audience space that originated from Diablo 2. They're focusing on making it an accessible game for people that might want to try the ARPG genre in general. And because of that difference in philosophy design and some changes that happened in development, like originally it was supposed to be a Dark Souls game, etc. So it's like there's a bunch of changes that happened in terms also of demographic as well as gameplay. And so because of that, it didn't really stick as hard with the people that were specifically looking forward to Diablo because it was a Diablo game. And so because of that, they've had to go back and forth on sort of their design philosophy. So they launched the game and they saw a bunch of feedback. Originally, everyone was like pretty positive. Like first week or so, everyone's pretty positive. Then everyone starts getting into the in game, starting realizing there's not basically anything there in the in game. Then they had to immediately like try to right the ship by focusing on in game, and then focusing on the in game. Still not enough. So then they're like, okay, well we're going to nerf to try to slow people down. Can't do nerfs anymore. So they kind of had to like they're learning as they go, to be honest. And some of the learnings they are learning. Some of them are taking longer time. But at this point, realistically, I think the game where it excels best, to try to keep it positive, is an entry point into the ARPG genre. I think there are plenty of ARPGs that do what people are wanting, that they can just go play. But there's not a lot of ARPGs that specifically, in my opinion, can bring. I think of people like my brother in these situations where he's definitely a gamer, but he plays games like Civilization and stuff. He doesn't play ARPGs at all. He plays on the console or on his Steam Deck. So if I introduced him to Path of Exile 2 or Diablo 4, like he's going to be able to access Diablo 4 way easier. Like the game is much more in rails. You are able to make a build, like you can basically pick random shit and still be able to kill stuff. So Diablo 4 is I'm trying to stay away from being like baby's first ARPG, but basically it's an ARPG that mainstream can play, probably have a good time, and that's where they excel. They're not going to excel in keeping people for like 7 seasons straight that are ARPG hardcore fanatics, or people that grew up on Diablo 2, where like yourself, you say you're boosting your friends, they're boosting you, you're trying multiple builds. People like you aren't going to stay in the game, but they're probably not looking for that as much as they're looking for like the occasional people to try each season, leave, come back, try the season. It's like much more casual audience, and I think that's kind of where it's been its bread and butter.
I think that one of the biggest issues that I also had, because I did play a little bit of season one, that's when the whole situation happened. One of the things that really rubbed me the wrong way was the list of chores for the season's journey, which I think that now they've kind of merged that together with the battle pass. I don't know. I think they've done something to change how that works. But I remember at the time I was like, okay, here's an objective. Go. I think it was like craft a gem or put a gem into your gear, whatever it was something that involved a gem. And I was like, I don't want to do this. There's no reason for me to do this because this character is still too low level for me to even care about gems. This makes no sense. And then there's another one that's just like, change the appearance of 5 pieces of armor. And I'm just thinking to myself, yeah, I can do that. That's not hard. But does it make any sense that that's something that you do in your season's journey? It just sounds so completely ridiculous. And I just couldn't understand the reasoning behind it. Because, like, you look at the end game of Path of Exile 2, for instance, you don't have anything like that. It's like, oh, go do maps. Like, there you go. Go do this level of maps. Go do that level of maps. So the season journey also rubbed me really the wrong way. But I'm assuming that stuff has changed by now because I've been told that you no longer have to do the quests, which is something that they expected. Because that was even another thing. I was like, I like these side quests. Like, they're cool. I really enjoy the side quests in Diablo 4. I don't want to do them every season. That's stupid. I'm going to burn out. I'm going to hate these quests by season 3 easily. So it just seemed like so many things were poorly designed when it came to the end game of it as well.
Yeah, to answer your question particularly about like the side quests and the journey, like season journey is still there. The side quests, etc., and I think you might be thinking about like the reputational grind
the
for each
reputation
area.
stuff, yeah.
That stuff you do not have to do anymore, and that they made that change fairly early in the seasons. I think that was like a season 2, might have been season 3 change. in which you don't have to redo the altars, you don't have to redo all that stuff. So you can pretty much skip campaign, jump right into it. In that aspect, it's much more of like what I would consider like an Xbox 360 arcade game. Like if you remember those back in the day where it's like top down, just smash monsters. It reminds me a bit of that sometimes.
I mean,
when the new season comes out.
You didn't play Diablo 3?
I've played all of them, yes.
Yeah, so it's like adventure mode, D3, right?
Yes, effectively.
Yeah. So, how'd you think about the story of this new expansion? Because I'm completely blind to all of that stuff at this point. I've seen.
Well, do you want me to spoil it for you, or?
I don't care about the story at all. I just wanted to know your opinion on it because, like, I saw Co Carnage's video on it, and Co is usually someone that I would say is a little bit more. He doesn't go hard on criticism, and he went really hard on the story of the new
which
expansion.
was fair. So my opinion on it when I did my review and all that, and I made a couple videos about this as well. But basically, my opinion on it is if you're looking forward to the Citadels because you want to play with a friend or something, or you want to access a Spiritborn, it's worth your $30 or whatever. If you're playing it because you're somebody who's a Diablo player and what you want to do is experience the story and like the conclusion and where it goes to, like the campaign is basically the worst campaign I've played in any Diablo game. I would say the Diablo 4 expansion. There's times where logically I feel like it doesn't really make too much sense. It leaves you on a cliffhanger that, in my opinion, is very unsatisfactory. And then it quite literally leads you up to like, you're going to fight Mephisto, just kidding, and then it ends. So you actually don't fight the main protagonist. That is the point of the game. So you fight something called, and some people get confused by this because you fight the big dog, which is like Mephisto leading you through the campaign. Yeah. That's not him. He's the Harbinger of Mephisto is his name. So, or Harbinger, or whatever the fuck you want to call it, okay? So he is a, like, image of, but you're not actually fighting him. He gets away, and then the cutscene at the end shows, like, he transcends and goes into into Akarat, basically. It becomes Akarat or whatever, and then we're going to fight. So basically, the reason people are a little upset about the story is you bought a game that's the Vessel of Hatred, but instead of you're thinking Vessel of Hatred, who do you think that is?
Mephisto, of course.
It's not. The Vessel of Hatred is actually the girl who is the vessel of carrying Mephisto. The next expansion will be about Mephisto. Does that make sense? So like you're about the lady going through the journey of her trauma, carrying Mephisto, and you're playing therapist for like 10 hours or whatever it is. And then at the end of it, Mephisto basically gets away, and you're an idiot for having let him do what he wanted to do basically the whole time. You play into his hand, and then it ends. So not only are you in a worse position than when you started the campaign, the entire thing you did, you're just an idiot because you did what he wanted, and now you got to buy the next expansion if you want to fight him. So it just kind of feels like a bait. I think the campaign in particular is an extremely weak point for the expansion. Yeah. There's other things I like about it, but the campaign is like a 3 out of 10. I think it's very bad.
So eventually at some point through your Diablo 4 career, you were like, okay, I'm going to go try out this other game, Path of Exile. And was that your first time playing Path of Exile at that point, I think?
Well, yes, but also no. I had played it to like level 30 or something for a few hours back whenever the Minotaur supporter pack came out. And I kind of just wanted to open the loot boxes, to be honest with you. So I had played it a bit, opened a bunch of the cosmetic loot boxes, thought they were kind of cool, and then kind of quit playing the game. And I forget why I even downloaded the game years ago. Someone recommended it to me, obviously, at some time, but I didn't get very far in it. I didn't know what I was doing, and I'm pretty sure my character was dog shit anyway. So, yes and no. I tried it for a few hours, but it was effectively my first time playing the game, yeah.
And how did you feel about it at that time? Because I the one thing that I remember, it's all kind of a blur because I also have terrible memory to begin with, but I remember like, oh man, DM's buying the $500 pack. Like, what the hell's going on?
Yeah. I mean, I liked the game. I will say that it was because I went in blind, so like I hadn't played it all the way through before. I didn't watch videos on it, I didn't know anything, but I also had a chat of like 2,000 people like sitting there like typing shit and spoiling everything. So it's like I acknowledged the chat exists, but it's as blind as I could get it. And I will say that it seemed very clear to me this is a game that you have to force yourself to play, knowing that you will enjoy it, as opposed to it's a game that's immediately enjoyable that brings you into the game by itself, is how I felt. So, like, I played through the campaign, I thought it was great, but then I also had tons of people telling me, you're going to love the game, which kept me going. As opposed to if I'm playing it by myself, it would have been what had happened back when I was level 30, I just would have quit. Right? Because I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. I'm not going to watch 10 hours of guides to be able to play a video game. Like, I don't like watching guides. I'm never one of these. I don't even like making guides, even though I do them on the occasion because people ask me. I don't even like making them. So I just want to play the fucking game. And so Path of Exile doesn't really, in my opinion, at least one, give you the tools to be able to just play the game. Like, you kind of at some point have to know what's going on, or at least try. So I was able to get through the game with the help of the chat and figuring it out. And I think I died like 27 times, and it took me like 3 days or something. But I would say that after getting into the game more and more, it's the game that like continually gets better the more you play it, is the way I feel about Path of Exile.
Yeah, it's one of those things that. At being like a streamer and a content creator, we have such a massive advantage whenever it comes to trying to jump into a brand new game, because we usually will have people that are dedicated in chat. They're going to be like, okay, listen, here's what you're doing wrong. Let me help you. And I think that's actually really cool, because that helped me a lot with both Path of Exile 1, because I jumped into Path of Exile 1 a little bit ahead of Path of Exile 2. It wasn't the first time, because I had played it, and for some strange reason, I had that arrogance that you tend to have whenever. This is a really weird thing. So when you finish a game like Dark Souls, I didn't even think the first time that I finished Demon Souls, Dark Souls, I was like, these games don't feel that hard. But then you have everybody saying like, oh my God, these are the hardest games in existence. You don't understand. These games are impossible. So that gives you a crazy ego boost. So I was just like, first time I was playing Path of Exile, I'm play hardcore. I mean, come on. So what am I, pussy? I just finished Dark Souls. Come on.
Oh,
so
no.
I go in there. I made it all the way to Act 3, died. And I was like, huh, that sucked. So I made another character, hardcore again. I was like, I won't make the same mistake again. Act 3, and I think I died to the same thing that I died the first time around. Then I was like, you know what? I don't think I want to play this game anymore. I think I'm good. There's clearly something wrong with this game, because I beat Dark Souls. I know better, which is just like
Back
a really...
to the beach with you.
Yeah, exactly. But this time around, I had chat to help me out and whatnot, and I was going through. I didn't do hardcore. And I was actually just coming up with a random build, and people tell me, oh, the build that you're kind of like veering into is actually pretty good. I was playing Templar, and I was doing like summons. Because I figured, oh yeah, let me just do a couple of summons, see how this feels. The thing is, I wanted to get the story, but going through the campaign, you don't really get that good of an idea of like the story and the lore of the game.
Nah.
So I ended up watching Talkative Try's lore videos before Path of Exile 2. And that kind of like painted a much better picture of, oh, so there's this beast and there's this guy called Sin. And then when that got introduced, I was like, wait. So the guy at the beginning of the cutscene with the blue eye, I know who that guy is now, and I know who the Eternals are. And, you know, everybody prays at Siri, because, of course, you got to praise at Siri. Because what's better than two, you know, it is what it is.
Yep. Yeah, no, I can understand I don't think the campaign in particular does a great job at expressing the lore, but I don't think it really needs to. I don't think people play the game for that, you know what I mean? So I do think that the little bit of cinematics they've added in the Path of Exile 2, like just the, you know, couple minutes in the beginning to set the scene, and then the 30-second like recap between, you know, stages or whatever. I think that was pretty well done. And it does kind of at least give you a general idea of what's going on, so that you recognize the characters and you kind of know the big bad of the game and all that. So I was glad they added those like very small indicators of what exactly is happening in the game as you go on into PoE 2.
So, Path of Exile 2, how do you feel about it? I guess we'd start with the story just real quick, because that's one of the things that a lot of people just don't care that much about, like you've stated yourself. But like, how did you feel about the story of PoE 2?
It's acceptable. I don't think it's like, you know, positioned to be one of the best stories I've ever seen in, you know, a game or whatever. It's an acceptable bad guy with an acceptable outcome, and, you know what's going on at least, and it leads you into the Atlas. I think it's mostly a tool to like explain how the Atlas is and why you're doing what you're doing on the Atlas and stuff, because that's where you're going to spend all your time. So I think the story's like decent. I mean, I like it, but I don't necessarily have anything particularly strong to say about it. I think it's just a story in a video game. Like there's corruption that's spreading. Stop the corruption.
Yeah. One of the most more important things I felt than the story itself is probably the themes, because I feel like Path of Exile 2 is very unapologetic about the material that it shows up. Like it's not really trying to pull any punches from a gore perspective, or even like an Act 2 where you, who is it, the goddess of water or whatever, she's just like sitting
Yeah,
there
she's
naked,
like mutilated.
guts.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought that the unapologetic themes is just like one of the better things about it, because, and even just the explicit dialogue that you get along the way, like in Act 1, Count Geonor calls the lady that runs away, is like, oh, you whore, how dare you, like all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Like I found that to be very immersive, as well as the art style. I don't know how you felt about that stuff.
Yeah, I mean they're bad. Like they're bad people. They're going to act badly. So I think it would make sense. Like I do think it's somewhat weird if you have like a big villain who's like literally the devil or something, and he's just like using like, "Hey, you Fruit Loop, like I don't like you" or something. You know what I mean? You have to have like
Yeah.
it makes sense. Of course, he's gonna like scream obscenities at her. Like so. Yeah. No, I think that shit's immersive too. You're in a very fucked up world. It should probably be fucked up.
So considering the amount of all of these RPGs that you have played, what do you think about the quality of visuals and animation in Path of Exile 2? Because that was one of the things that I feel
Oh, yeah.
surprised me the most, especially coming from PoE 1, because I only started looking at marketing material like 1 week before the game came out. And when I started looking at it, I was like, oh, wow, this is very different, because initially it was supposed to be an upgrade to PoE 1, is what they said they were going to do. So I figured, oh, it can't be that different from PoE 1, right? But turns out it's a whole new engine, whole new animations, all of that stuff. I was impressed.
It's I think it's the best visuals in the ARPG space. And with one thing that I will say notable about Grim Dawn, which doesn't have good graphics, but it has a good layout and a good uh, comparison of size between like buildings and trees and stuff like that. That I really liked about Grim Dawn, and the
Sense of
being able
scale.
to move your camera scale. Thank you. Being able to proportions is the word I think I was searching for there. And so I thought Grim Dawn did that really well, and I think that's something ARPGs don't do very well. But besides that one point, I would say that Path of Exile 2, I think visually looks the best. When I was playtesting it, I was like very surprised at how good it actually looked. And there's plenty of other ARPGs that look good or acceptable, you know. But I would say PoE 2 looks like impressive, in my opinion, with its visuals. And I've seen some comments that some people are like, I think it doesn't look very good or whatever. It's like, I don't understand these opinions at all. Like, I think it looks visually very impressive, but, you know, I guess people might be seeing something different than I'm seeing, or on a different computer than I'm seeing it on.
Yeah, it's one of those things that it does get weird when, because I did see some of those comments as well. People are like, "Oh, this game doesn't look that impressive," and I'm like, I mean, and doesn't look that impressive compared to what? Are we comparing it to Crisis? Like, what exactly is the
Yeah.
comparison point? It's an ARPG. You're not going to be comparing it to like Horizon Zero Dawn or something like that, right? You're going to be comparing it to other ARPGs. That's what makes sense. I haven't played D4 in a while, but I also thought D4 looked very good. But I don't know which one of these two I would consider to look the better. But I like the themes in Path of Exile 2 a little bit better. I feel like they're more unapologetic about it, so I tend to lean more in
Agreed.
that direction. And because of the crazy stuff they end up doing with some of their characters, the animations also look really cool, just because of the tremendous skill customization and stuff like that you end up having. How'd you feel about the music? Because I remember at one point I tuned into your stream and I was like, "Oh man, he's not listening to the in-game music. Damn it!"
Yeah, I do listen to the in-game music when I'm doing boss fights or anything like that. But when I'm, you know, grinding my 5,000th map in the
Yeah.
Atlas, then I'm probably going to listen to, you know, like I like to listen to video game OSTs. So I go back and listen to like Command and Conquer, Age of Empires 2, or Homeworld or something like that. But in terms of the music, I would say Camille did a fantastic job with his team. Like he's a very notable musician. And so I listen to all of the tracks. He uploads them on his channel, and I would recommend people that don't listen to the in-game music to at least listen to them during boss fights and town encounters, etc. And you're on your first playthrough, I would listen to the music as well. I think it sets the scene very well, particularly when you're going to like your first encampment there, right at the start of Act 1. I think the music is somber. It's probably the word I would use it, and I think it's very good music. I will say that maybe on the occasion like a more like upbeat, faster, like hyper type of song in some moments would have been kind of cool to see in addition. But they have things close to that in some of the boss fights. I don't want to spoil it all, but I would say it's like a 9 out of 10. Like I'm very impressed with Camille's ability to constantly deliver like good music both in PoE 1 and PoE 2.
Okay, so now that we got rid of all the basics, like, how's the visuals, animation, sound, all that stuff, really solid all around. Let's talk about the actual first time you jumped into the game on your stream. What character did you play, and what were your feelings on it?
Okay, so I started Warrior because basically the entire lead up to the game launch, I had been doing like a week-long planning, like what are we going to do? We're going to do Warrior into Blood Mage Melee, into Stormweaver Archmage, into Gimling Archmage. Like that was my plan, and it was built upon the thought that I knew Warrior because that's why I play tested, and I'm going to use this to farm gear for the more complicated version of like Crit Warrior from Blood Mage, and then I'm going to do a more gear required thing of like Stormweavers. Well, basically my entire plan got thrown out the window because Stormweaver is actually like super easy to gear, so you can just like wear gear and be fine.
That's the one that you can do the spark build. I'm assuming. I don't know.
Like
all
the
of
spark
all
build
of the
is the spark build's a fucking meme in my opinion. Like you can just build it. I know there's super high expensive versions of it, but like if you just want to go and like start clearing maps, like you can just play the game. Warrior is like basically a joke. Like I understand when I say this that there is going to be people that be like, yes, but have you seen King Konger, who's a friend's like one shot 265 million build? It's like, okay, look, you're right. It can one shot like the biggest boss in the game. That doesn't make it good. Like I'm saying, that's not how the game works. Like it's like, okay, you can set up a million things and wear the boots. It does a one shot, and they're gonna nerf the fuck out of it anyway. In order to one shot the boss, the rest of the time you're playing the game, it feels like dog shit if you're doing the melee skills. So it's not even necessarily the warriors bad. It's that the warriors only melee skills, which if you're playing a warrior, you probably want to unga bunga. Yes, you can play minions on warrior and kick ass. My point is like if you want to actually use a mace or something, the mace moves are like the worst moves in the game, like easily. And I've played Fireball Blood Mage where I literally kill myself trying to cast my moves. Warrior I think is like straight up worse. Like it's very unenjoyable to play long form. And there's people like Karn. I don't know if you watch Karn. You go watch him stream. He's on his way to level 100 Warriors, level 99 right now. He's playing SSF, grinding it out. And the only way he can screen clear, like consistently, is using Herald of Ice. And yes, he can one-shot the whole screen. But you listen to the stream, he is miserable. He is miserable. The entire time he's playing, he's like, I fucking hate it, Warrior. Why do they make Warrior dog shit? And it's like, yeah, I get it. He's doing it to himself. I get it. It's not an enjoyable experience. I played to level 90, and I was just like, I have had enough. Like, all the moves are clunky and slow. And yes, you can make it work on bosses and bleeds all right, but it's just not fun to play. It's just really not fun to play. And then it doesn't get any better. These are the offensive problems. Now for the defense, it doesn't get any better. Because if you're a warrior, you're stacking strength, which is HP. And guess what's the worst defense out of all of them? It's health. So you got a dude who looks like a Giga Chad that's chiseled, that's like lightly tapping people slowly. And then he's in this huge armor, which by the way is slowing him down because the worst defense for some reason needs a movement speed penalty. And then armor's dog shit on top of it. So it's like, Mr. Glass from Unbreakable. It's like, okay, imagine Mr. Glass looks like a Giga Chad, but that's him. Like you touch him and he explodes, and then he does like nothing. So it just doesn't make sense. It really doesn't make sense, man. So I'm hoping that swords and axes like legitimately make me want to log into the warrior, because the only way to play warrior is basically not to play warrior. And the videos I'm seeing where it's like, I fixed warrior, it's like they're running like energy shield or minions, like they're literally doing anything else other than like it's like, okay, yeah, the ascendancy is good if you do everything, if you take the tree and immediately do a hard right and just head to where all the mage shit is, sure, he's good. Are we really playing a warrior? Oh, well, I don't know.
I saw Crip's recent build that he was working on, and I was like, oh, Crip's playing warrior. Let me see what's happening. And I'm like, that's not a warrior. He's running around with an army of skeletons. What do you mean?
Yeah, that's
a necromancer, bro.
Saying, dude. It's like, I mean, Crip's a genius, and he'll make anything work. I love the man, but it's like, I am logging into a warrior to summon minions, my dude. So when they fix the Unga Bunga and the big slams better, well, I'll play it again.
So warrior has been my second character, and it's my current main. Okay, so I'm playing warrior as well. So
these are hard hitting combos.
Yeah. Like I know exactly what you're talking about. The thing for me was this was the first time that I'm playing like Path of Exile properly, and so in Monster Hunter I play this weapon called the Gun Lance. And the gun lance is not a very effective weapon. It's actually one of the worst weapons usually. So I'm kind of used to playing something that's not very good. But it's like the reason I play the gun lance, I like explosions. So the first character that I make, I'm like, no, it has to be a mercenary. Because I heard the words grenade launcher when they were talking about a crossbow. And I was like, yep.
And the Rambo in you came out. And you're like,
I was
absolutely,
like, yep, I need explosions. This is what I need this. So I play Witch Hunter. I went all the way to endgame. I was doing like tier 7 maps by the time I stopped. And the reason I stopped is because I was playing Standard League. So I'm playing Standard League, and one of the things that happens is as I'm going through the game, just progressing, somebody from my chat just goes, hey, I found this really cool crossbow. And I was like, oh, cool. So it's a bombard crossbow. It makes it you shoot more grenades. And I was like, oh, this is perfect for me. And it has like plus 100% physical damage. I was like, oh, this is great. So he gives me the crossbow, and I slam it. Plus 3 to all projectile skills. I was like, oh hell yeah.
Now we're talking. Yeah.
I'm just like, yeah, straight up. Go through the whole game, Cruel, Act 3. Get to Act 3, I'm like, oh, I should probably get another crossbow. So this is when I start, okay, let's learn how to trade, because I don't know how to trade. So I go into the thing, and I start figuring out how does trading work and all of this stuff. And basically I discover, so I can just get a way better crossbow for 1 exalted orb. Just like, that's it. That's the price. I just go in there. Somebody's got this, probably a piece of trash for them. And it's like, it was an advanced bombard crossbow. So I buy that, and I was like, oh, this is great. So I just keep going. And then I was like, I mean, is there even a reason for me to engage with the crafting system of the game if I just keep playing like this?
No, I mean, not in Trade League. Absolutely not.
Yeah, you just shouldn't do it. That's kind of, I got the tier 7 maps, and I was just thinking to myself, well, it's about time to get another upgrade. And I was trying to do the crafting stuff, right? I'm picking up like all of the bombard crossbows and slamming them and stuff and never really getting anything good. Then eventually I was like, why am I doing this? I could just go to the trade thing, get another one, and just like not even engage with any of this. So then I was like, let's go and make a solo self-found character. Hardcore. Hardcore solo self-found. I wanted to give hardcore.
Which you can do, which is fair. Now you can do it for freaks. You go with a normal SSF.
And then it goes back into SSF, which I think is a good idea, because at least, I did like 3 hardcore attempts. First time died Freythorn. After the King of the Mists. So I killed King of the Mists, and then I died to a random archer.
That's the way it goes. You get the crossbow guy who like kneels down and then hits like 95% of your HP for some reason. Yeah.
Straight up. So
he's the real boss of the game.
Second time I go in there, and I die to King of the Mist because I never engaged with his actual mechanic. So I didn't even know about red stop, purple run. I didn't know because I just killed him so fast most of the time. Didn't even matter. And so third time, I made it all the way to the beetles, the big beetle, the 9th treasure of Keth or whatever. I grossly overestimated my survivability when I was running it.
Oh, no.
I was like, oh yeah, the loot pinata, here we go. And it's like, dead. I was like, oh, okay. So that one was the character that I was like, no, I'm just going to keep playing now. Like, I'm done with this hardcore shenanigans for now. So I kept that one going. And the thing is, you were talking about how, Warrior's weak. Offensively, my character's fantastic. Like, I'm clearing no problems whatsoever. Defensively, nah. Because like you said, armor is complete and absolute garbage. So what I'm playing is totems. Totems is actually a ton of fun.
Totems, okay, yeah.
Yeah, and the thing
So you went Warbringer? Are you going Warbringer totem or Titan totem?
Warbringer totem.
Okay, yeah.
Because I was thinking, I want these blue spirits things that come out. Like, you made the meme, what does the monkey do? And I was like, I'm going to find out what the monkey does. I'm going to go find out. Monkey's actually probably the worst of the summons because all he does is like push stuff around, so it's not particularly useful.
He charges in, unfortunately. He does a small bit of stun build up. It's funny. It's I actually played hardcore solo stuff for Warbringer yesterday. That's what I did on stream yesterday. I was trying to figure out what the monkey does as well. So I just did the totem build, died at like level 28 or something, and it was like, all right, I'm gonna go back to my Gimling. But the totems are like kind of fun. How far did you go with the totems?
Oh, it's my main character right now, so I'm doing tier 11s, I think.
So you went real far. You like the totems? Is a screen clear pretty good, or what's the feeling on totems?
It's okay. It's nothing that's going to be like Spark Sork or the monk build that I see everybody do. You're probably running that on your Gemling Legionnaire, I would imagine.
Yeah.
With the
Herald of Ice, Herald of Thunder combo, and the bell. Yeah.
That stuff that just clears. It's never going to be like that. But then again, I think you and I could both agree that's probably not intended, right? That level of clearing. I don't know if that's intended or not.
I don't know. That's an interesting conversation because I hear people say that it's like, this doesn't look like the PoE2 vision, and it's like, okay, maybe, but like if not, then what actually is? Like, are we supposed to struggle with every pack of mobs? Because I'm gonna tell you this, if the point is that when we do the maps I'm supposed to like fight every pack of mobs, I ain't playing this game for years. I'm not gonna do thousands of maps and then I can't screen clear. Like, if you can't screen clear, like when I'm doing tier 15, tier 16, I have 300 hours on the character, but I'm still doing the same amount as if when I just enter maps. What is the point? Is my question. Like, if you can't ramp to that point, then I don't understand.
So I do have that as a topic for us to talk about a little bit later. But basically, the whole thing is, I'm not clearing as fast as they are, but let's say I can do a tier 11 map and solo self-found, obviously not trade league, so there's obviously going to be a little bit of downscale there. Also, my noobness, my build probably could be better optimized somewhere, something, because I'm still I'm looking at the nodes and being like, okay, maybe I'll put this node. The warrior is actually a character that I've respect a ton. So like my mercenary with the grenades, I respect him once to get rid of some nodes that I'm like, I don't really like these all that much, so I took 2 or 3 nodes. That was about it. The warrior, I probably spent well over 300,000, 400,000, just constantly respecing. Okay, I'm going to go over here now. Now I'm going to go over there, just testing all different stuff. So it's I'm clearing a tier 11 in 15 minutes, and this is because I stop a lot to pick up loot because I'm a loot goblin, so I'm always thinking, oh man, maybe that maybe that expert slim mace will have plus to melee skills, and I'm going to pick that up, and I'm going to take that back, and that slows you down a lot. If I wasn't doing that, I could probably do, I think, tier 11's 10 minutes, give or take. I don't know if that's good or if that's bad, but that's the clear time that I have. And I've actually found the way to make things viable for myself in a way that I can survive. So since you can't rely on armor because you're going to die instantly, I'm running around and block is always up. So I'm just I put the totems down, block is up. And what I did was I put magma barrier so that I can be attacking while I'm blocking. So I'm just running up to the mobs come on, attack me, do it, I dare you. So you're clearing with both the shield blocking as well as the totems, and that kind of works okay. So the pacing is good, but the survivability is just not there. And that's one of the things that I started talking about in my stream. Why does GGG have a hate boner for warriors? This feels like World of Warcraft and Blizzard all over again. Since vanilla, warriors have been paying taxes and they just suck for some reason.
Yeah, the disparity between monk and warrior is pretty hilarious. You could argue monk's not even a melee class. Basically.
Yeah, that's the thing that I've been saying, because people would be telling me well, melee's fine if you play a monk, and I'm not sure I consider the stuff that I see from these other builds to be melee. And people are well, you have to do the, I don't know, fist strike or whatever it is, that's melee. And I'm just I don't know, dude, I see those waves coming off of the character. I don't know what those skills are. There's a lot of range on those things, okay? They're doing fine.
Like a spell blade or something. It's magic melee. It's Yeah, I mean, I get it. It's your avatar or whatever. You're throwing out the shit. I understand. But I feel the same way where it's I want to hit the people with the hammer or the axe, and watch it hit the ground. And I guess you could argue Sunder's not exactly melee either, but like I want to hit the ground, huge eruption, oh my God, God himself has hit the ground with his hammer, everything blow up. Like I want to see that shit happen. And it's just kind of like, it's the delay with everything that kills me, bro. You stampede and your guy's like, here I go, I'm going to go now. And then it's like, dude, like it takes fucking forever, bro.
It was funny because I run shield charge because I like shields, so I wanted to use shield abilities, and I run shield charge, and everybody was telling me, oh yeah, Stampede also blocks. Everybody in my chat was telling me, yeah, Stampede is just like the upgrade of shield charge. And then I do Stampede once, and I was like, what kind of an upgrade is this? There is no blocking. What are you guys talking about? It doesn't block at all. It doesn't block anything. It's just like you're signing your own death sentence if you're trying to Stampede in the middle of like a really high-level map, unless you're running something like Energy Shield or Evasion or something. You're running Stampede with armor? You're dead. Like, what do you mean? There's no surviving that. The animation commitment is atrocious. Like, there's just way too much animation commitment for skills that don't even seem like they do that much damage.
For all of them. For literally all of them. I mean, Sunder, it was unironically a 0.31 second, like, attacks per second. So it's taking me 3.5 full seconds to get a move. Like, 3 seconds to get a move off. I mean, I should be casting... This should be an ion cannon, the GDI. I should be summoning the GDI, coming with an ion cannon. It's like, there's no, what am I destroying? Like a nuclear plant or something? Like, what the fuck am I doing in 3 seconds? And that's with like full attack speed, everything. Like on the tree, it's 3 seconds. So it's like, dude, I can start my move. The boss can start his move and beat me to it and kill me. It's like, I have to cancel half the animations, and God forbid that any like normal white mobs decide to surround me, and it's fucking over. So I do trying to play some of these moves was just a joke. Or it's like the earthquake. Then I hit the ground, and it's like it's cooking. It's gonna boil. Like it's like, what are we doing? Like, can my guy do damage now today? Like, holy shit.
I remember the earthquake because my chat was telling me the same thing. They're like, oh, you're doing totems? Earthquake pairs really great with totems. And I was like,
I don't get
it. I'm looking at the tree, and like, I think earthquake is one of the first ones, right? It's at the very top or something like that. And I was like, guys, sure, fine. I go and I make earthquake, and I was like, bam. And then you're sitting there looking at it. It's like, huh? When's the damage part?
Yeah.
When's the damage part gonna happen? Right? My totems will destroy everything before the friggin' earthquake does anything.
And it's every one of the moves. So it's like you're like, okay, well, you know what? Earthquake. Okay, I mean, I get it. It's earthquake. It's the aftershock you're waiting for. And then you try Stampede, and you're like, okay, like I'm literally going in random directions. The animation's so fucked that the tech to be able to move faster on the warrior is to Stampede and then immediately dodge roll, and it like clunky like rubber bands you forward. Like that's literally the state of the warrior. Okay, so it's they're all like that though. And then Sunder, it's one every 3 seconds, and so it's I looked at these moves and I'm just like, dude, there's like 2 moves that happen in this century, and the rest of them are just PoE 3 by the time the animation finishes, and you're just fucking waiting. So I cannot play this shit, dude, and it's pissing me off because when I was playing PoE 1, I played Bone Shatter. My guy's jumping in. I mean, I'm hopping everywhere with the axe a million times, and then you go into this game and it's hadunk, and it would be fine. It would actually be fine if it was like the pacing of the campaign. But by the time you get into maps, like everyone's got hasted auras. There's temporal bubble. God forbid you get temporal bubbled. So it's like I think the warrior was the first class made. I think it was literally the first class made, and they made it when they were starting the game and like making the campaign. Like that's my opinion of it. And the pace was slower, the campaign was slower. They got the warrior built, and then they built out these other classes, and in game started to go, and they're finishing up their classes, and they started to like put tools together to actually play the game. But I think warrior was like their first iteration of the class or something. Because you look at the classes, none of them are clunky. None of the other have these 3-hour moves, as far as I can tell. They're all smooth.
Because I've only played 2 classes. I don't have as much time to play. I have kids and stuff like that, so sure. It's kind of hard to get down and play as many classes as you guys end up playing. But like I played the Merc. The Merc felt good, except for Grenades are a little bit challenging to do on controller because I like playing on controller and aiming the grenades because like you want to lead them a little bit to give time to explode and stuff like that. And on controller, a lot of times you end up overshooting, and so the monsters run past the explosion radius by the time they get to you. So that's like the biggest challenge for me as controller on Merc. But I was able to make it work with oil grenades because oil grenades explode on contact. So you're just like, okay,
Yeah.
now you're slowed down, and I'm gonna get you no matter what. And Mercenary felt great to play, but it also felt somewhat squishy. But interestingly enough, the Warrior was so much more squishy than the Mercenary because even being squishy, my Merc still has some evasion. So he still evades some stuff, and then he compensates a little bit with a little bit of armor or whatever for the rest of the stuff. But like the Warrior's just got armor, so there are plenty of deaths where I'm just like, the shield is up, and then I'm like, okay, let me put the shield down to put a totem, and the moment shield goes down, like 2 projectiles come through, dead, over. I was like, man, it's like
Well, there's no more percentage life, but there's tons and tons of
there is
percentage
one
energy
percentage
shield.
life. There's like a 3%
Yeah, there's
life in the tree.
3% on the stun threshold one. Yeah, you get that for sure. But like the life is gone, so what happens is energy shield by default becomes the new life because you can actually scale it, and
Yeah.
then the gear itself gets it as an implicit. So you're getting it in the gear just because it's energy shield gear, so you're just getting basically raw HP. Imagine if when you had armor, not only are you getting armor, but you're getting raw HP as an implicit on the gear. Well, suddenly HP could probably be pretty good if then you could also roll on the gear affixes HP again and HP percentage. So that's where energy shield is. You get it on the implicit, you can roll raw dog energy shield, and then you can energy shield
That's
percentage
why.
also. And so you get a fuckload of it, and then there's easily accessible double energy shield. So you can just get Grim Feast and then double it, or Meditate with the Monk, which is already busted. For 2 points, you just get double energy shield. So you can scale it in like implicit on the gear, percentages, also flat, which is ridiculous, and you can still roll HP, so you get the HP literally anyway. So it's like I'm going to get maybe half as much HP as I would on my Warrior just because I don't have as much strength. But if I'm rolling strength, I'm literally going to get the same HP my Warrior has. It's not like the Warrior is getting a fuckload of free HP at all unless I'm Titan with the bonus strength. So it really doesn't, like the HP scaling doesn't make any sense at all because you just don't have any of it, and it's not on the gear, and I don't know. You would think that they would have bases with HP on it or something if we're not going to put it on the tree.
My Mercenary, I think, had around 3,000 life, and he was doing tier 7s. My Warrior, with no evasion, has 2,200 HP, and he's doing tier 11.
Yeah.
But it's like, the moment that shield comes down, it's all over. So you got to keep the shield up. That's it. You just run around, active blocking everything, and you'll be fine. The moment the shield comes down, you're done. It's over. But yeah, it's, I'm doing okay so far. I think that I can push this up to like whatever the cap of the maps is. It's just a matter of whether or not the map sustain takes me there because I've been brutally unlucky with that stuff. But tell me of your thoughts about other classes before we move on.
I think Monk is like the smoothest, most fun class to play right now. I think Stormweaver is like a pretty good class, but also is, or I should say Sorceress, but it's like kind of boring. Like it's basically Spark meta, so you're literally just
Yeah,
like these like real low impact feeling moves.
I
But
played
it's good.
I played multiplayer with a friend of mine who was playing a Spark Sork, and that was the first time that I died in a map because I couldn't see anything.
Yeah, you
Because
can't see shit.
as a merc at the time, I still needed to see my grenades because you're manually detonating the grenades, so you need to know where they are to aim the explosive arrow. And it's like everything on screen is just blue. I don't know where my grenades went. I don't know if I hit my targets. I'm just gonna shoot the explosive arrow and hope for the best. And then eventually I just died because I didn't see something that was on the ground because the whole ground was blue. So that was the first time I ever died
Yep.
on the map.
Or God forbid you're playing with an Infernalist minion summoner and they just have the skulls everywhere and the minions everywhere and there's flame walls everywhere and you literally can't see the screen at all. And if you have a bad computer, well, good luck.
Yeah, I've seen also like some people running these fireball sorks where the fireball starts bouncing off the walls and just like, tanks
Yeah,
everybody's
I tried
GPU.
that.
Is that fun?
Yeah. I feel like Ignite isn't a terrible play. Maybe if you're doing like on hit fire, you can make it work, or you're doing conversion or something. But like pure Ignite focused damage over time fire feels horrible. Like Ignite is basically worthless as far as I can tell. I'm sure there's a build out there somewhere where someone's gonna be like, but actually, it's like, okay, but for the intents and purposes of like, I'm gonna play a character, not have every unique I need, just playing like a fire ignite character, it just feels terrible. So that's one archetype I really hope gets buffed. I heard on hit fireball is like pretty much the only thing that I've seen from like pure fire builds that's really going on right. And the fireball is cool. You can use wild shards and ricochet and all that. And that's a cool build. And the fireball is like kind of fun. But solar orb's kind of cool too. But there's just something lacking about fire that makes it really interesting. Maybe I gotta play a little further to get more into in game or something. But it's just not really. It's not that fun of a build.
So monk right now you think is probably one of the best classes.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's got everything you need in the kit.
Yeah, because you can make him like evasion, energy shield hybrid, which is kind of like
and even get armor. Yeah. You get all of it. So, and while armor is not good against slams, like it does mitigate small hits. So the times you're getting surrounded by like white mobs and etc., having armor is actually good.
It's like on higher maps, it doesn't seem to do much for me. Like the moment the shield goes down, armor. I feel like if you were to remove the armor stat entirely from my warrior, I don't know that if I get to keep all the other stats that I have, right?
Sure.
And you just remove the armor stat, I don't think I would notice much of a difference.
Probably not. You're also not that tanky yet, though. Like, you have 2200 HP, so the amount of time you have to mitigate lots of small hits is pretty low. So if you're getting hit like 300-400 chunks, like it's only going to take you a few hits and you're kind of dead already, right?
Yeah.
So, but as you climb your EHP and you get to like 4,000 or 5,000, you're probably going to feel that armor mitigation a little bit more in the smaller hits in particular. I'm talking like white mobs surrounding you type of stuff. Stuff like slams, big hits, extra physical damage yours, crits, like all of that's going to feel like absolute ass. You're just going to get shredded into oblivion. But for the little stuff, armor's like kind of okay. But outside of that, it's not really useful.
I kind of feel like active blocking should have a bigger effect on slams. I don't know if it even does anything right now. Active blocking like a big slam from a boss. I don't even know if it does anything. I don't know if I've noticed a difference.
Overhead damage, which most slams are overhead damage from what I can tell, it does not block. So like if you're talking about like the hand from breach boss, like you're just gonna get it's not gonna do anything. I think there's a node that's, I'm not sure, but I think there's a node that's familiar like acrobatics in which you can block all hits, but you block significantly less or something like that. That might actually help with that.
There's a note from the Warbringer that says something like your block when your shield's now raised can now block everything, but you block 35% less or something like that. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, that would be pretty good. Except for I'm assuming it doesn't count unblockable moves. But if that's
exactly.
I know they also have a 40% base chance, which is pretty nice because
I want to get that one.
Yeah, you could wear the ones that are like energy shield or something for shields and like actually scale that as opposed to
No, I refuse to put on energy shield. I'm going to struggle through. Listen, I play Dark Souls, I play Elden Ring. I'm gonna keep on pushing through. I'm just like,
if you make it to pinnacle boss with 2200 HP, I applaud you because you are getting one popped by almost anything at that point. You're gonna have to be a bin level player.
Yeah, no, I probably hope to have some more HP by the time I get there. I just need to get a little bit lucky with drops. Have you tried the crossbow out at all?
I did make a mercenary for like 3 levels, and I was like, I'm not using this shit. Because I made a gym lead, and he's like level 91, and I tried the crossbow, and I was just like, I was elected to lead, not to read, and so when I have this like gun, and I'm like sitting in the back here, and I'm like, shoot, reload, shoot. It's like how I feel about minions. It's like I just don't want to, like, I want to be up, like, being the one doing the thing. And when I'm shooting, like, it's the same way I feel about rangers. Like, when I'm, like, shooting shit at them, there's something about it. It's just, like, not as fun for me. Like, the archetype, I just don't really like it. And it feels a little clunky. Like, the gun feels a little, it's like the way I feel about warrior, but way less. It's just a little too clunky for me with the crossbow. I don't know. I wasn't feeling the crossbow.
That's one of the things that I was going to ask you, if you had experienced the joy of the crossbow jamming, which happens so often. You would be surprised. Like, your gun straight up jams. So, like, there'll be times, if you were to watch somebody stream actual crossbow gameplay, Like just a regular build, not some pre-made build. I saw some guy do some rapid fire builds go, just like nonstop
Yeah.
deleting everything. But like, a regular, more basic build, what ends up happening is for some reason, sometimes the reload doesn't go through. And then you just start hearing this sound of your crossbow go like, and nothing comes out. That happens
Oh, it's
so
more
often.
accurate.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, I wonder if that's an actual mechanic they put in here. It's like, sometimes your crossbow just jams. You have to kind of deal with it. I was like trying to increase attack speed, reload speed. Like, give me something to stop these goddamn jams. Because you throw the
No,
grenades.
haven't experienced that.
Yeah, you throw the grenades, mobs are running at you, and you're like, okay, the explosive shot needs to come out now. And it goes like, it's like, damn it.
Yeah, that'd be pretty annoying. That would, if
It
I died to that in
happens.
hardcore, I'd be pretty pissed off.
It happens so often, you have no idea. Yeah, so that's something that they need to work on as well. The armor, the jamming of the crossbow. I think everybody complains about that, which is yeah, it's a little bit annoying, but still, I still had a lot of fun with grenades. Grenades are a ton of fun. Explosions, big booms, good stuff. So the Merc,
I gotta give it a fair shake. I haven't gone long enough. I played for a few minutes with a crossbow. I was like, this just feels like a pile of ass, and I stopped using it and pretty much immediately switched over to a quarterstaff. But I should give it another fair shake.
I just feel like it plays very differently from what you would expect because usually in RPGs you're used to I hit button, thing happens, right? That's
Yeah.
kind of how it works with the bow, I think. I saw my son played a little bit with the bow, and he's like, oh, Dad, look at me shoot all these things in the air. And then I'm shooting these poison arrows. And he just, he presses the button and it does it. With the crossbow, it's like, okay, I'm gonna press this button, this loads the ammunition. And now I press this other
Yeah.
button, now this shoots the ammunition, which is a little bit different, but I personally liked it. I thought it was fun so long as it would stop jamming. That's the biggest issue. But
Oh,
so let's talk about the game pacing thing that we're talking about. Being somebody that comes from Souls and Monster Hunter, this was an interesting thing because I watched that. I don't know if you watched the Hog video where he's super frustrated with the game.
I did. Yeah, I did.
Yeah, I was kind of sad because like I'm sitting over here as an Elden Ring player, Dark Souls player, having the time of my life. And then there's Hog over there going like, man, fuck these Elden Ring players, these motherfuckers. I was like,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah.
damn. I feel so bad. Because yeah, I love the pace of the campaign. I like that it was hard. I like that the developers were not shy about putting you in the ground. Because a lot of developers nowadays are very shy about putting the player in the ground. It's like, oh, you made a mistake. It's okay. It's okay. You can make 50 more before we actually put you in the ground. And in this game, it's like you can be fighting the bloated Miller, and it's like, oh, here you go. Boom. Done. You're dead.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I like that. I thought that was cool. But how did you feel about the pacing of the campaign for now? Just the campaign.
I mean, I like the campaign a lot. I know there was a lot of frustrations. I saw people in my chat that were getting stuck on like the Act 1 final boss or Act 2 final boss. I know those moments exist for people. I think some of that was due to the launch of the game having lower currency drops. Like, for instance, I'm one of the people that got unlucky my first playthrough in the Warrior. I didn't get my first Exalted Orb to like level 44. So it was, quite literally like I'm in Cruel when I get my first Exalted Orb. So I experienced that, but I had, play tested the game 3 times already. So like I knew the first bosses and I knew what I was up for. So I kind of knew the moveset and I was able to play through. That being said, I, was having to do it without basically getting the ability to craft, because trade wasn't really a thing like the first, hours of the game being out.
Yeah.
So I didn't really get to craft anything or really get mini drops at all. And so I can see why people were getting gated so hard by some of these bosses, because they might have just run straight to the boss. They might have just followed the main quest line, got straight to the boss. They're maybe a level below the area. And then they also didn't get drops and they have bad gear or something and they're kind of getting dumpster. Then maybe they don't have runes yet, so they don't have code res for the boss or something like that also. And so, yeah, that definitely happened. And when they turned, my opinion on that at the time was like, I did a review of the game after I got the in-game and started playing, and I was like, my take is that it would be good if they turned up the currency a little bit, which they ended up doing.
Which they did immediately after, yeah.
they did like within like 19 hours or something on video. It wasn't my feedback. It was like everyone's feedback was they were already working on that at the time, but I just happened to voice it directly before the update. And it felt better at the time. But like my opinion was, I think a lot of people were getting frustrated because they gave you systems in the game to make your power increase, but they didn't really give you the ability to interact with the systems. Like I didn't realistically be able to do any crafting at all through the campaign in my playthrough. I just had to pick up what was in the vendors and go. And that's all I really had to work with because I had 1 exalted orb or 2, I think, by the time I got to maps. So that wasn't really a realistic option. And alchemy orb 0, for instance. So like there was no opportunity to basically do anything. I could have picked up yellow gear and disenchanted for Regos and tried to get a 3-stat item, but 3-stat items are still garbage. Like you basically have to buy good shit out of the vendor. So I think mostly what happened in the beginning with the people that are getting frustrated is they were experiencing bad RNG on top of a much more difficult pacing of the game and all that. But in terms of my opinion about how I feel about the campaign, I quite like the campaign. I like the pacing of it. I think that it is obvious that once you've gone through the campaign once and you have any gear at all available to you or even gold to gamble, etc., the campaign immediately becomes significantly easier. And if you're using a build to get through the campaign, like a leveling build, I mean, I beat the campaign in 12 hours, like including Cruel. That's not a very fast time. There are people doing it much faster already. And you could argue, well, you're a no-life streamer and all that. It's like, yes, but it is possible is my point. Like, it's not the type of game that you do get completely gated on second, third, and fourth playthrough. You just got to throw on, a couple low-level uniques or whatever gear you happen to have, hit the vendors, gamble, learn the game, basically. The campaign will be cut down to, like, short hours fairly quickly once you're replaying it. So if people are worried about playing through the campaign, they do it on their first playthrough. They're like, I don't want to do this every time. It's like, well, it'll be faster as you build out your alt accounts and as you're learning the campaign, it's going to be faster and faster.
But your first time per season is still likely going to be potentially slow. Depending. Yeah,
it'll be slow.
Yeah, you're like my first campaign completion. I think I don't know if it was 40 or 50 hours, but that's because I'm not really blasting. I'm the type of streamer that is like I'm streaming. I'm chilling. I'm talking to chat. I'm interacting as much as I can. I'm not really like, okay, guys, I got to go. Let's pay attention. Got to go fast. So, naturally that's going to add more time. We get into discussions about, is this balanced? Is this fun? Is this not fun? That type of stuff. So a lot of time is actually like dead time. It's not really time that you're actually playing the game. The second time that I played through where I didn't have gear because I went to solo self-found, that one also took significantly longer because I was playing hardcore until Act 2, and then I died, and then I have nothing. I get to Act 2, and I'm just like, I got nothing. So now you have to refarm all your currencies, get some gold, get all of that stuff. That was painful. That took a long time to kind of recover from. And when I got there the second time, that was the first time that I was really stuck on a boss, which was the Act 2 boss, which a friend of mine was stuck in there as well, my friend Fighting Cowboy. And I went onto his stream and I was like, bro, try this, change this thing about your build. Here's some gems. Please, I was trying to help him out because he was on his stream. He was super frustrated. And I was just trying to help out to see, okay, let's get you past this boss. And eventually he got past the boss. But yeah, so then I got stuck in the second boss. And that's when I was like, okay, I'm stuck here. My gear sucks. I'm using a one-handed mace because that was the build that I was doing. I have a shield and I have a mace. That's my survivability. I'm not going to be able to get enough strength to equip 2 maces and go Giant's Blood. So I have this one mace. That's all I have. What can I improve? So I run a couple of, maps from the campaign, right? And I'm like, okay, no upgrades. Let's do the Trial of the Sekimas. Do the trial. Get the, what are they called? The Ancestral Spirits. They helped a little bit. Didn't really make that much of a difference, but they helped a little bit more distraction, a couple of more openings. You beat that. Get to the third boss, and this time I'm like, because I've been trying to do Rolling Slam, because I have my totems, and then I need an ability to do stuff while my totems are doing damage. Sure. And I was like, okay, let's try Sunder. Sunder takes 10 hours to come off, and you're locked in animation. And even with the one-handed mace, it's miserable. So I'm like, okay, Sunder's not going to work. All these other abilities I'm trying out are not going to work. And then eventually I was like, I think I'll just auto-attack the boss. I put Rage on Mace Strike, And that's when I figured out, wait, rage increases the damage of your totems? The interactions with warrior are super weird because if you put rage on totems, you don't get rage. I assume the totem gets rage and that would increase its damage. But if
the logic is totems are you are not the totem. That is the line you need to remember, and then you'll understand exactly how totems work.
Yeah, but I was just so, because I'm like, okay, so if I get the rage, the totems get the damage. If they get the rage, I don't get the damage. This is weird. And there's a couple of more interactions like that. So like, for instance, the magma barrier, you're like, okay, it says here, if your shield is when you raise your shield, you know, you get the magma barrier. And then it says on the description of charge, while you're charging, you raise your shield. And I was like, oh, so I can charge No, can't do that. That wouldn't make sense. So there's a bunch of interactions. Those are not the only ones. There's a bunch of more interactions that with Warrior that just don't feel like they're working all that well. But anyway, I go into Doriani with Mace Strike, and I just destroyed Oriani with Mace Strike. I was like, oh, yeah. I didn't realize auto attack is the most powerful build in my kit, most powerful ability.
It's legitimately good.
It is.
Like the basic attack is actually quite good on the Warrior, which is hilarious. I don't know if that's because it's your moves are so dog shit as the Warrior, or if it's like Mace Strike is legitimately good, but it feels like Mace Strike is actually legitimately good.
It is like I'm in tier 11 maps, Mace Strike, whenever it comes to bosses, that's like my main ability. Because like I put up the totems, whenever I have openings, I bang on the bosses and bring it. It's not even for the damage. It's because I just put a bunch of stun on the Mace Strike and it gives me rage. So it's like that's I'm just buffing the totems, you know? So that's the whole point. I go up to the bosses, smack them with Mace Strike, buffs the damage of the totems, stuns the bosses, all good. And that's kind of like the main strategy when it comes to bosses for that character. But
I will say, to one point about we were talking about the pacing of the campaign.
Yeah.
And I feel like Act 1 is like a masterpiece, in my opinion. Act 2 is quite good, but then you get to Act 3 and it drags a lot. I think that Act 3 is legitimately like either too long or maybe if it's because we have to repeat the campaign right now, 1 through 3 again. It's like I'd rather having to do Act 3 again. But it's like you do the Drowning City, which is long, and you have the Water Hags, which are super annoying, into Utzel, which is like long again. And granted, if you know the way, you go right, and then you go up, you can immediately get to Viper, then you go right, and you can kind of cut through. Like, it's not near as long once you know the pattern. But like, that being said, the first few times I'm playing Utzel, it was fucking miserable. I'm like, this thing is a maze, like it's super long and annoying, and the mobs are actually quite strong there, and they have a lot of chaos damage, and so it's. I feel like the Act 3 goes on like it feels like 2 acts into one. Like it feels like I play Act 3 and 4. Like Act 3 should end like when the gateway goes up or something, and then it's like, okay, now I'm going back and doing all this other stuff with Viper. Like that feels like Act 4 to me, and they're kind of like smushed together.
I agree. I agree that Act 3 does feel way longer than any of the other acts. But I mean, it is factually longer. I think it has more zones than any of the other acts, as far as I'm aware. Or at least if it doesn't have more zones, because I didn't actually count them. I think it does. But if it doesn't, then it has much bigger zones than the other 2 acts, which, obviously.
I think it has both. I think it has more, and they're bigger. Larger. Yeah.
Yeah. And then if you have a completionist mindset like I do, I'm running around in the map with the Mistress of Filth or whatever, and everybody in my chat saying, "What are you doing? Why are you exploring this map?" And because I'm like in Cruel. And I'm like, well, I need to get the mushrooms. And they're like, it's just 2 potions. You don't need that. It's like, no. I need to get the mushrooms to complete the quest. I have to. What do you mean? It says right there, get the mushrooms. So it's like, I'm doing all of the quests, even if they don't matter, because it's just like I want to check the box and I don't want to see it there. It's a weird thing. But yeah, that third act takes a lot longer, which I think to me what's going to end up happening as you get into the seasonality of the game is that I think I'm probably only going to play like 1 character per season. I think that's going to be the way that I'm going to enjoy Path of Exile too. Like now I'm testing different characters, but I think that moving forward, once we get into seasons proper, it's probably 1 character per season for me. So I hope it's a good one, because otherwise I'm going to be screwed. No more of this like, oh, armor doesn't actually work. Oops.
Yeah, true. I'll say that It makes the hardcore journey going through the campaign like kind of fun, because like in hardcore SSF for PoE1, you have a few moments of like, oh shit, like this is okay, here we go, type
Yeah.
of boss fights, innocence or something, right? But PoE2, it feels like that, like with all of them, like you have multiple boss fights and, constantly throughout them. And so you have a lot of moments where it's like, okay, this is going to be like a good 1v1 on the hardcore, and it makes it much more exciting. But the other part is like in PoE1, you get to map so much faster that rolling hardcore characters doesn't feel like as big of an investment, because you complete the campaign in like 6 hours. You get through, you're on the end of it, into in game, and you're doing your maps, and then you fuck up and die to like something you messed up with in maps. But in PoE2, like I feel like you have a pretty solid chance of dying like 15 hours in at the end of the campaign or something. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Particularly
Maybe Crow is not as bad, but
particularly King of the Mists, I feel like King of the Mists and the whole Freyr Thor zone, because that's when I don't know if that's the first time that you see chaos, but that's the first time that you get a ton of chaos. And yeah, you can't even like build chaos resist almost at that point. So it's just like, well, good luck. Just go in there and hope that they don't catch you while you're running into one of those little bridges, because that's how they got me the first time. It's like, oh, there's like a bunch of arrows into this bridge and you can't move and die. Oh, okay,
and the
thanks.
ritual locks you into this real small area because
Yeah.
you're on basically the Mire map, so you're kind of locked into like these tiny little spots. Yeah, I know. It's for sure it's that way.
So, the pacing of the campaign is one thing, but when you get to the end game, the pacing I felt completely changes. Because, like, the campaign, to me, the first time going through is very methodical, right? You're going through and it's like, okay,
Yeah,
here's the thing that I'm doing. The boss does this thing now. No, I'm going to dodge. I'm going to do this one. And then you get to maps and it's like, no, I'm just going to kill you before you even do anything. I'm just going to, like,
yeah.
boss is about to, like, moving into the thing, and I'm like, there's already 3 totems under you. The second you come out of that animation lock, you are getting slammed to high hell. And so how do you feel about that? Because it almost feels like you're playing Path of Exile 2 until you get the maps, and then you play like maybe your tier 1 maps and your tier 2 maps, and that's still kind of Path of Exile 2, but it's getting way faster. And then once you get to like tier 4s and tier 5s, you're no longer playing Path of Exile 2. You're playing Path of Exile 1 at that point.
I mean, I like Path of Exile when in game. I feel like I constantly hear that Path of Exile when in game is the best of every ARPG. It has the most depth. There's all of this, and it's what's keep people looped into the game for years and years and years. I've seen that same dialogue point of like it's PoE2 until you get, and then it's PoE1 again. And I've heard people use that as like, well, we should make it PoE2. But in my opinion, like you have to have the in-game be different, and it's also what made people continue to praise PoE1 and grow the player base year over year. So I kind of wanted to necessarily remain the same way as the campaign all the times. I think that you play through the campaign, but then I'm also hearing points about people like the campaign takes too long and it's a drag, etc. I don't want to do this on every character. You said yourself you're only going to play one character because of how long it takes. So it's like, okay, well, if it's that same way in-game also, I have a feeling your playtime would probably actually be less than more if you change the way the in-game actually works. I think you would quit the game sooner. I think when people get to the in-game, they actually want to feel like they're crushing a lot of mobs, and they want to actually start to make progress towards their character in terms of gear progression, in terms of tiers of maps and pinnacle boss progression. I think if we slow them down to the campaign pacing in order to try to keep the Dark Souls vision or whatever alive, it's not the reason people play ARPGs anymore. I think if you want that experience, you have it in the campaign, and you have multiple characters you can run through the campaign to get that pacing and the bossing and the feeling and the progression. You could do hardcore, and there's all these things you could do. But in terms of like actual in-game, yeah, I think it should be faster paced. I think there should be more mobs you're killing. I think you should be able to get powered up. I had this discussion on stream the other day, and someone had the same point. And I said, okay, so let me ask you this. Let's say that we get to, and I'll ask you the same question. We get to in-game, all right? You're in the maps, let's say you're going the same pace in tier 5 maps, okay, as you did in the campaign. And you do tier 5 maps, let's say, for 3 hours, okay? And you get a couple meaningful upgrades in terms of your gear. How much faster, after those 3 hours of progression of playing the maps and getting, let's say, 2 new pieces of gear, do you think you should be able to go through that same map?
So you're saying it would take me 3 hours to complete like the 10 tier 5 maps? Is that what you're
The
saying?
3 hours are arbitrary. It's just a point of like you've played the game for a while. It could be 10 hours. Let's say you played 10 hours of tier 5 maps. Your character has made progression. You are a stronger character than you were previously. Now that you've played for, let's say, 10 hours of those maps, how much faster should you be in the same level of power, aka those maps? Should you even be faster at all?
Yeah, I think you should be a little bit faster. The thing to me is always when I start thinking about faster, the thing that instantly jumps to my mind is like, you should be faster. Yes. You shouldn't be Herald of Ice, Herald of Lightning faster. If that
Sure,
makes sense.
and that's probably an outlier. I mean, I'm sure Herald of Ice is going to get nerfed.
Or Spark Sorceress faster, right? I think that the pacing that I'm going through maps right now, I feel like that's been pretty good with my Totem Warrior. And my Totem Warrior is not, I don't even have like a 5 link yet because it hasn't dropped. So I'm on tier 11, no 5 links. So I'm just sitting there with my little 3 support gems on my totems, which makes them not that powerful, obviously. But yeah, I still think that I'm clearing at a reasonable pace, and the action in my warrior feels satisfying enough. So I do think you should get faster as you get better gear, but I don't think you should ever get to that level of like just zooming through, or like, for instance, one-shotting bosses. I don't know how that was in Path of Exile 1, but in here, obviously, we're seeing builds that's just like, okay, let me do this thing, and buck, pinnacle boss down, one hit. Is that something that we want?
I mean, depends. I'm not currently one-shotting any boss, and I die the pinnacle bosses at a decent amount, and I have pretty solid gear in SSF. So, like, to give you an idea, I was doing a fuckload of damage to the King of the Mist, but then he caught me with a snare, and then the thing put me into the tornado, and I died with 10,000 energy shield on a character that's, doing millions of damage a second. So, like, I can still die, and I'm on tier 4 breach bosses, but I've died to the hammer slam, because I wasn't one-shotting him the second he came up, etc. So I would say that I have a fairly strong character at level 93, Ice Strike, Monk, Invoker, crit-based, using CI, 10k energy shield, like the whole thing, Ingenuity belt, all that shit. And, with an unethical staff, and like I still can die to the boss. Now, in terms of the one-shot builds, like, for instance, Arbiter in a 6-man party is 265 million health. So if we're seeing moves like Hammer of the God, one-shotting with the boots or with the shield wall tech in order to actually explode those with the overkill damage, like that, or Detonate Dead one-shotting tier 4 Arbiter, like, I'm sure there's going to be some tuning in terms of one-shotting in-game pinnacle bosses. Yeah, probably. I would agree with you there. Okay. But in terms of, in order to get you, let's say your Warbringer character, to be able to do, let's use the very first tier 1 breach boss example. You need 6 million damage, right? So he has 6 million health. So you're in tier like 11 maps, you said, right? So your bosses are...
That's going to take a while to
it's
do
going to take
my
you a
totems.
while.
Yeah.
Right. So once it's going to take you quite a bit of time. So you're going to need to be significantly stronger than you already are, which means by the time that you become that significantly stronger, the maps that you're going to be one-shotting everything, right?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so now if we extrapolate out that same spectrum here, and we go, now in order to be able to do tier 4 Arbiter in-game boss, you're probably still going to be one-shotting tier 15 maps. There's tier 15, 16, 17, and 18 maps. So if you're able to one-shot everything on the higher end, and that's the end goal of, or not even one-shot the boss, just be able to defeat the boss at tier 4 eventually, then your build's going to have to be strong enough to shit on content that is tier 15 maps, etc., or else the numbers literally aren't going to work out. So the argument, in order for it to be like, we need the pacing to be slower, the PoE too, you actually have to nerf the top tier content
bosses
significantly in order to actually make that work, or else these are unachievable things, which actually means that the ceiling on which builds can be is going to be pushed down significantly. So even though while the argument might work in terms of pacing, in terms of actual variety of builds and how strong builds are going to be, it's actually an argument to nerf the ceiling of builds and how wild the game can become, which I don't think is a good argument to make, because that's what made people fall in love with PoE 1 in the beginning. The feeling of like, I made a wild build that does fuckloads of damage. Well, you're going to need that fuckload of damage to do 65 million damage in the tier 4 Arbiter boss or whatever it is, which by inherently, because you made that build, means you're going to be one-shotting through the other related maps unless you're doing a setup style one-shot build or something like that, in which you have to set up everything to only one-shot one particular mob, which typically, in the example of like King Konger with the Hammer of the Gods build, doing 265 million in one hit, you can't use Hammer of Gods in all those mobs, so your map clears, bad.
So currently the progression, which again, I'm going into this kind of like blind because that's the way that I like to experience games, because it gives you the perspective of somebody that's coming in and not really, oh, I'm going to see what is the most powerful crypt build or whatever, follow that to the letter, and then I'm going to obliterate everything. I wanted to struggle. Hell, I thought that I was going to get to a point where it's like, nope, this character's bricked, have to make a new one. Still haven't gotten to that point on any of my characters, which was surprising. I feel like the passive tree is a little bit more accessible. But the point that I'm making is currently the progression, I would expect that according to what you're describing is like, okay, so you go to tier 15s, and then after tier 15s, that will be the approximate difficulty of a tier 1 pinnacle boss, or maybe it's a little bit harder than, maybe it's on the level of tier 16 map. Like, what would you say is the approximate difficulty of a tier 1
pinnacle boss? So like the beginning tier 1
the very one, the first one.
Okay, let's use Breach Boss. It's easily accessible. You get 300 splinters. It's the cheapest invite, and I think it's one of the easier fights. I think King of the Mist maybe is the easiest, but Breach is like, close there, right? That is, like I say, 6 million HP and is drastically more difficult than any map boss. So the map bosses are basically a gigantic elite mob. They're like a glorified elite mob. They're a campaign boss. Like, they're not a real threat. Okay, so much so that you can even modify and give them affixes like you would a rare mob. You can do that on the Atlas tree. And they also have the Atlas tree that make the map bosses more difficult. Like, for instance, I'm, all the way maxed out on the Atlas boss tree, so it's +1 difficulty, I think 5 times, on top of a potentially tier 18 map. So you have... the map bosses themselves can have as much HP, if I fully juice it out, as like a tier 1 pinnacle boss. Like, it can have millions of HP, like 5, 6, 7 million HP in a normal map boss as well, which will take me, at least a few seconds instead of one-shotting. And like, it's going to take me 10, 15, 20 seconds or something to kill the boss as well. So in terms of a tier 15 non-juiced map, like normal white map, 0 out of 10 on the Atlas tree, etc., they are light years difference in terms of HP and difficulty as a tier 1 pinnacle boss.
Pinnacle boss, yeah. See, because that's the point that I was... So to me, and again, I'm coming in as a newcomer, and I want anybody that watches this now to be like, okay, why is this guy trying to change it? I'm not trying to change everything. I'm just trying to think through it logically. And my logic would be, wouldn't it be better for the whole pacing of it if you would actually start doing pinnacle bosses a little bit earlier? So let's say I'm in tier 11 right now. Let's say that would be the approximate difficulty of tier 1 pinnacle boss. Then by the time you would get to like tier 15s, that would be the approximate difficulty of like a tier 4. Because at that point, you would be all juiced up to kill the tier 4 boss like you described. But at the same time, you're still not one-shotting the tier 16s or tier 18 maps or whatever.
We have some common ground in this opinion. Like, I actually feel somewhat similarly. So in Path of Exile 1, how far did you get into map progression?
Oh, I never even got the maps in Path of Exile 1. I'm a complete newcomer. So,
sure. So in PoE 1, they have something that are called like quest invites. So as you're progressing through, like, it does the same thing in terms of map requests, like do a tier 1, do a tier 3 or whatever. Like, they have you go through the tiers of maps. And as you go to certain milestones, like 12 or whatever, it's going to send you a boss invite. And that boss invite is a quest version of the boss invite. So it's green. You can farm another one just by doing one more map. It sends you to an easier version of a boss, basically, to learn the fight. And then when you do like a normal one, like the one you could trade for, like a Breachstone, they would be in this game, for instance, then it's like the actual version in which he does, solid damage and all that. So there is room, in my opinion, and I've said this in some of my videos, I believe that there should be some progression in terms of boss invites as you are progressing through, because there is a gap in terms of pinnacle experience as and tier 15 or what have you as the mapping. There is definitely a gap there in terms of difficulty, and I think the idea is currently in the game. They only started the in-game somewhat recently. In fact, in one of the interviews that I did with Jonathan Rogers, he stated that what they did is they moved the in-game after they saw the release of like Diablo 4, and people were saying that, or the expansion in particular, that there wasn't enough in-game, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. So they're like, we need to not do the same thing. And they focused from swapping the campaign to the in-game. And that was a fairly relatively recent decision, in terms of when their early access was released. So their in-game is not fully cooked.
That's something that I can completely understand. Like I'm just arguing hypotheticals here. I'm not arguing it from the standpoint of like, oh, this is clearly poorly designed. This sucks. Because I feel quite the opposite. This is, ever since Diablo 2, this is the only ARPG that really managed to grab me as much as it did. So like, I don't know how long ago the game came out. It's like the 6th of December or whatever it was. But we went through the holidays, right? I'm a family man. Holidays in Portugal, which is something that, it's something that is very celebrated. Like we're all just like constantly going to each other's houses and celebrating the holidays, blah, 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 blah. And somehow I still managed to put in over 250 hours into this game. Yeah. So it's like, it was
good game, yeah.
It was to the point where I was like, I finally got to the trouble of learning Steam Link because I never messed with Steam Link. And I was like, man, if I could like remote play Steam on my phone, that'd be fantastic while I'm out. And so, yeah, I was like on New Year's Eve, everybody's like talking and drinking. I'm just like, nah, bro, I need to get my warrior to maps, bro. I got stuff to do. So it's like I'm having a blast. So it's like I'm mostly arguing it from a hypothetical standpoint.
Oh, and I understand, and I totally agree with some of the points you're saying. My point is not so much that you're arguing against an early access as much as that they started their in-game development recently. Is more of my point. So I think that there will actually be those invites like similar into PoE 1 because I think there's a lot of room for like smaller boss fights or quest version of some of these pinnacle bosses, etc. That could fit in there. And I would expect that they probably are assuming some of those are like the Citadel boss fights. So you find the Citadel, then you get like Doriani or like a harder boss fight.
Or you don't find the Citadel, which was your
case. Or you don't find that was. It took me like you speak at 250 hours. It took me a little over that to be able to find my very first Citadel, and I had like multiple level 90 characters. So it took some time. Now they pop up like crazy, but I think I have a bunch of conspiracy theories of my own about it, but it is what it is. I don't think anyone actually 100% knows what is going on with the Citadels. I assume it's mostly RNG or like a point from the center or level based or something like that. It seems like as you progress, they start to show up more, but still I'm missing, plain SSF's a little brutal because I have tons and tons of all the fragments for all of them except the copper one. So I just can't find copper Citadel. So it is what it is.
But SSF is also a ton of fun. But like to kind of understand something here. So what do you think is, number one, what is your opinion on it? Like, how do you feel specifically about it? And how do you feel, because you're more in tune with the community than I am, and how do you feel the community feels about this? Which is, do you think that GGG should move to a situation where, yes, you progress through the tier 18s, and then you escalate your power to the point where you're one-shotting everything in tier 18s, and that's when you start doing pinnacle bosses? Or you should start doing pinnacle bosses earlier, and you never get to that point where you're just like one-shotting everything in tier 18 maps? Like, where do you stand, and where do you think the community stands?
In terms of the community, I think they're split because everyone's got their own position they are in the game. Everyone's progressed, to a certain degree, and not everyone's all the way through everything and has opinions based upon where they're at and what they've experienced. I can't speak for the community, but I can tell you myself, which is that I think in its current iteration, I wouldn't change the ceiling of the pinnacle bosses. I think one-shotting, like, 265 million, these outliers you're seeing, like literally one shots of the tier 4 and all that, like, yeah, they're probably going to either nerf some of those builds, nerf the top end damage. I'm sure Herald of Ice is going to get a nerf, or we were talking about the screen clears. Like, there's outliers. Do I believe the possibility to become strong enough to shit on all of the content in the game should exist? Yes. Because if it does not, then what are we chasing? Like, if we don't have the ability to become so strong to dumpster content, and we're always going to struggle, like you have the strongest boss in the game, you always have to struggle against it no matter what build you have, there's not really, a lot of shining stars in terms of builds if they're all going to perform similarly in every scenario. So if there's builds that are boss killer builds, but builds that while you're a boss killer maybe doesn't do so good in map clearing, builds like that, yeah, they should exist. This existed in PoE 1, like you could make a boss killer build that's more of a boss killer, but you have like your map farmer build. So like I have a build that is better against bosses. It's my Ice Strike Monk, And then I have a Gemlian Legionnaire that's like a stat stacker that's better at clearing the maps. So I clear the maps with my stat stacker, then I swap to the boss killer to fight the bosses because it's a little bit better against it. And I like the concepts of having builds that are specifically for that.
So wait, you share the progression of the Atlas?
Of course, yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that's how that worked. It shows you how much of a noob I am. I had no idea that's how that worked. I thought that each character would have their own independent progression of the Atlas.
Well, to be fair, I thought that as well until I realized that they do it the same way they do in PoE 1, which is you share your Atlas with the League progression. So your SSF characters are all sharing.
Yeah.
Your trade individual are all sharing, like within the League itself.
Yeah, no, I figured that because the different leagues have different atlases. That part I knew. I just thought that even though you would get the same atlas, you would still have to progress through the maps that you had already done. But thinking back to it, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. So having two characters is actually very interesting prospect. Yeah, that makes sense. I hadn't thought about it like that.
You can target builds for individual things. So my logic when I made my Stormweaver was I had the Warrior and I wasn't clearing maps very fast, but I was doing good against bosses because I had Hammer of the Gods and Sunder. So I thought, let me make a character that will clear maps faster, and that's why I made a Stormweaver Spark. And I started clearing maps with the Stormweaver. Well, it wasn't a very good build for me. I know it can do good against bosses, but for me, my version of it wasn't very good for bosses. So then I'd swap to the Warrior and I'd fight them on the Warrior. And now I'm doing a similar thing now that I only play SSF because trade feels horrible, so I'm playing SSF. And I like having different styles of builds that have weak and strong points. And if they all perform very similarly against peak content, then, I probably wouldn't enjoy having the variety of builds as much.
Yeah. So one of the things that happened very early on when they came out and they were like, okay, this like, I forget the name of the skill, the slam skill that the warrior had. That
supercharged slam, yeah.
Yeah, supercharged slam, just like deleting bosses. They're like, okay, we're going to have to nerf that. That's way too powerful. Then very shortly after, they nerfed gas grenades, which I was using, but I wasn't using it the same way that everybody else. So I was just using gas grenades to like spread debuffs and actually do gas things. Most people are using gas grenades to stack them on top of each other and explode and big clump of damage. And so I barely even felt the gas grenades nerf. I was like, oh, it doesn't change anything. I've been using explosive grenades, not gas, so it's whatever. But, they came out and they nerfed that, and there was a very quick response from the community. I felt like people were like, you can't do this. Like, I just got my build online, and now you nerf it. And it's like, clearly those things they thought were too powerful. Like, and a lot of people are saying you should just buff everything to get to that point. Like, where do you stand in this? Because I'm of the opinion that if something is an outlier, then yeah, it should be nerfed. Like, I think it makes sense. And usually this draws the ire of a lot of people because I will do the same thing in Monster Hunter. Like, if I feel like, even though I kind of gave up on Monster Hunter because it's just not that game that's ever going to be that well balanced to begin with. But like sometimes in the past, I would argue like, okay, this weapon's maybe a little bit too powerful, okay? If you're killing stuff in 2 minutes and everybody else is taking 12, I kind of feel like, this weapon's a little bit of an outlier. Maybe it needs a little bit of nerf. But people are of the opinion that it's a PvE game, just buff everything else and everything gets deleted super fast. Like, what do you think about that standpoint?
Well, you can't just buff everything.
Yeah.
If you just buff everything, then you're essentially arguing for power creep. And it's a game that's going to be developed for 10 years, if they continually only do buffs, then the game becomes a meme. And we just had the whole conversation around pacing of the game and potentially slowing it down. So obviously buffing it up is not the solution. Now, nerfs only, again, is not the solution, because then all you're doing is bringing things, reverse power creep down to the common denominator of the dog shit builds, which isn't necessarily what people want either. Obviously, the conclusion is you have to do both. Stuff that are not performing as intended needs to be buffed, and things that are outliers, I would say specifically things that are economically viable outliers, meaning things that are not expensive builds that are outperforming things that are expensive builds, because this is an economy game as much as it's an ARPG. There are values related to builds. So if you're buffing a build that's 1,000 divines or mirrors or something, you need literally god tier perfect gear in order for the build to even work, and it's 15% better than a cheap, like 2 divine build. It doesn't make a lot of sense to nerf that, even if it is outlier and the most strong build in the game. So I think that GGG is smart enough to realize when things are performing due to base level stats and mechanic iterations, as opposed to, the build is just number wise the best. Like, I don't think we can just go and be like, this one's number wise the best, destroy it. Or else they would do that things with like unique items. Like Mage Blood existed in PoE 1 for many years, and it was considered like the strongest item because of how much utility it had. And yeah, there's some people that argued whether or not Mage Blood was even good for the game and all that as well. But obviously they're okay with outliers in the scenario that's tied to rarity or economic value. So I think stat stackers might be an example of this.
As in
So
one
I
of
think
the cheaper alternatives, the Gemling stat stacker is like too easy to build to be that powerful, is what you're saying? If I'm
No, it's an expensive build. So, like,
Okay, so
in
it's
order
the
for
other way
Stat
around.
Stacker to work, there is some argument to be said that the floor Stat Stacker is fairly cheap. It's Pillar of the Cage God's non-expensive item. Hands of Wisdom and Action, I think, are only like 5 Divine or something. I don't know. I play SSF. It dropped in Tier 1 of Breach, for instance. So, like, you can get the item through a Pinnacle boss. However, to really make it pop off, you have to have what is arguably, I believe, the rarest item in the game, which is Astramintus, which is effectively like the new Mage Blood. It's 150 Divine or something just for the amulet, which is just raw stats. You need certain jewels as well. They're corrupted with bonus stats, etc. And then if you're going all suffixes in stat stacking like Dexterity, Intelligence, Strength, then you don't have suffixes for resistances, which means you also need the chest plate that gives resistances with like the 5 sockets. So there's a lot of requirements to really make it an obvious outlier, and therefore it's quite expensive. And we're talking 300, 400, 500 divines for a good one. And so in that type of scenario, it's hard for me to argue, well, this build is 500 times more expensive than the other build in the game, but it's 30% better, we should gut it. It's like, I don't know. Like, maybe I'll just let GGG decide how they feel about their vision of the game and what they want on that one. I don't know if I necessarily think that extremely expensive builds shouldn't exist in the game at all. Like, I think that there should be economic chase as well as in-game progression-based chases related to pinnacle bosses, etc. You also need some economic chase for the people that are either chasing rare drop items in SSF or saving up value to purchase an expensive item in the game as well. I've seen people enjoy that side of the game. So, I think some outliers like Herald of Ice are probably going to get nerfed, and yeah, I could probably argue should be. But in terms of strong builds existing, yeah, I think they should exist.
It's a perspective that I hadn't considered, like the amount of investment that it takes to put a build like that online, because I just see so many people running the the Herald of Ice, Herald of Lightning thing, right?
Yeah.
And obviously I'm now learning that there's different flavors of that. There's the stacking with the Gemling Legionnaire, and then there's the actual monk version, and so on and so forth. Obviously, I'm still a very new player to this, but it's just like the cost of the build was never really something that I even factored into whether or not it should be. Because naturally, yeah, there are some builds that should potentially be more powerful, but I still feel like there needs to be some amount of a ceiling. Because like you can run the risk of, like, I think the developers themselves stated in an interview, you don't want the players to feel that this is the only way to play the game, which right
sure.
now it almost feels that way. For me, like if I was somebody that cares about meta, I would be, if you're not playing the the Herald of Ice, Herald of Lightning, what are you doing? It's a waste of time. But I don't care. I don't care that much about the meta, so I'm happy. Like I'll play slower than the other ones. It's whatever. I'm never going to be a top tier player in here anyway, so I don't care. But yeah, it's a balancing act basically, is what we're getting at.
So I agree. I would say in terms of meta, metas will always exist no matter what you do. So they can nerf Herald of Ice, Herald of Thunder. Sure, there will be a new meta. People will figure out what's
people
the
will find something else. Yeah,
it's just the best thing that's out currently. And no matter how many nerfs you do, there will always be a best thing. And that best thing you'll see most people playing because they want to farm either economically as viable as possible. Your real life time is time is money, friends. So your real life time is very valuable. So if you can run 5 times as many maps as a build that isn't using an item, like why would they not just use the item and save 5 times as much of their real life time? People are going to always cater to attempting to do that. And so just nerfing metas is typically not something that I believe they do either. I think they're trying to focus on whether or not intended interactions exist. And if it's, this is an intended interaction and people figured it out, well, that's fine. that's how it's intended. If it's not intended that Herald of Ice, Herald of Thunder are supposed to combo together due to the infusion support gems, and they're not supposed to recursively proc, well, then we might see an armor explosion type of nerf like they did with armor explosion, where that was recursively procking as well. So I don't know what's intended. If you take away Herald of Ice, screen clear is going to take a massive nerf in a lot of builds. So which is going to lower the pace of the game significantly in people that are running those builds, which means there will be another build that people will go out and find the screen clears, and then we'll all convert to that build once people figure it out. That's probably how it's going to end up turning out, I would assume.
Speaking of, the economy and all of that stuff, do you think that, I was going to say Magic Find, because I still think about it as Magic Find from Diablo 2, but do you think that Rarity's in a good place right now?
I'm mixed on it. I don't necessarily enjoy needing the feeling of having to have the stat in order to influence drops. Like, I don't like the idea that there's fear of missing out. Oh, I didn't have Rarity, therefore I'm not getting in many exalts. I've also found this to be like kind of a problem in SSF. Like, what I actually need is white base stealthier amulets. But if I have a really good ring or amulet that happens to have Rarity on it, I actually don't want that, because what I'm trying to do is farm white bases. So if I have Rarity, then it actually fucks me. So it's another dead stat for what I'm trying to accomplish now, which means I'm having to constantly balance around, okay, now I want Rarity because I'm trying to farm exalts so I can slam. Now I don't want Rarity. It's like, maybe I just want to play the game and then farm the drops as they come. So I don't know if I necessarily like building around Rarity just as a general concept. I think it's a little bit of an overblown topic in terms of how much people believe it's actually like ruining the game or the economy. I don't know if that's necessarily like a huge problem. I do like actually having the ability to get some currencies, but if we're going to remove Rarity in its entirety, I think, it's getting exalts and stuff for people like in the mid-tier maps, sort of where you're at, like the tier 11, 10 portion is when I feel like the Rarity actually feels quite good. You get 80, 90% Rarity at that point. You can farm a lot of exalts and make some progression pretty solidly. So removing the Rarity is going to be a hit for people trying to, like, genuinely, and with RNG being crafting too, like, you kind of need a lot of exalts. Particularly in FSF, if you need to be able to slam these all the time. You can't buy shit. So not having Rarity when I'm trying to farm currency in order to actually gamble or even map sustain, like a lot of the times I have to three exalt maps in order to max juice out the map, and you need a lot of exalts for that. So I don't know how I'm feeling about removing Rarity, or at least the concept of having more currency.
Map sustain is miserable. It's been miserable my whole experience, and people like, oh, let me see your atlas. Like, oh, it looks fine. Oh, okay, so my atlas it's not the best. I know that my atlas is not the most optimal. I've took an advice from a friend of mine. Oh no, it's Alex. And he was like, you should put the one that duplicates rare mobs, because then there's another rare mob in the thing, and there's might be more chance of you getting more waystone. So I know that I'm using that one, and people are like, that one's not that good. I was like, I don't know. I trust my friend. Okay, I'm gonna use this one node, but I do have the one
too. Yeah.
I do have the one for 20% quantity, and I'm now pathing down to get the 3-6% ones at the bottom as well. And it's still just, there was one time that I killed 5 bosses in a row and I didn't get a single waystone. And I was like, there's a bug, there's something wrong. Like, I'm like 5 bosses in a row and not a single waystone. That's crazy. That's insane. So yeah, that must have been one hell of an RNG outlier, or maybe it was a bug. I don't know, but it definitely happened to me, and I was like, bro, I'm dirt poor. I got no maps. So I'm about to be sent back to like tier 1 at this rate. It's insane. So yeah, the waystone sustain has been one hell of a struggle. But in regards to the Rarity thing, I kind of feel like, what if Rarity just wasn't in every piece of gear, and they would increase, like, say, right now, 100 Rarity, and then it seems like there might be diminishing returns is the theory that I hear. So what if, let's say, 40 Rarity is the equivalent of 100 Rarity, but you can only roll it on, like, rings, rather than have it roll everywhere?
I think I'd rather have it tied to maybe unique items. It's like, okay, so there's some, because what I don't want is for it to show up with other stats, because all that really does is means you're still going to have the same amount of rarity because you're going to, if they're on rings, for instance, of that example, okay, well, I have a ring with 64% rarity because it double rolled. And so that means that I now have a very valuable item, is what that means. And rarity on rings now just becomes more expensive. It's still the meta. It's also, you're going to have to get rings that literally have good usable stats regardless. If you put it on uniques, then the other affixes aren't variable. And it's like, look, you want to sandbag your build by wearing this unique to get rarity, you go for it. But like, you're not going to have these other stats to make your character work. Like one of the common strategies right now for Magic Find is using like the grave gloves, which make it where when other people kill, it counts as if you killed it, and then you run all rarity on everything. Well, if you're doing the all rarity and like some of the rarity items that are uniques, etc., like your build can be pretty dog shit and you basically can't kill anything, but you're stacking rarity on everything. The problem, I think, doesn't so much come from like rarity existing as a strategy, with people or something, as much as it's like it feels mandatory on like every piece of rare gear, where you basically need to make it to go into the build to have any chance of actually getting currency. And this is why Stormweaver Spark is like so proficient, is because you can basically run the build and still lose those affix slots. And still have it work quite well. And so that's part of the reason people running Spark, is you can put magic rarity and it fits in well. I think if we either need to decide whether or not we want rarity in the game at all, and if it exists, maybe exists in only some unique items. So you can do like, oh, you're running Venter's Gamble just so you have the rarity. It's like, okay, I'm doing a rarity thing, and I'm obviously having some downsides with it or something. But it's the fact that it shows up, and you have to basically build around that stat in a rare item, which makes the rarity pieces like actually quite expensive. And that whole concept, I think we just pick a side. Like, do we want rarity as a concept? Do we not want rarity as a concept? If they want rarity as a concept, okay, they need to balance. They don't change anything. Then just balance how much rarity actually affects things. Either remove it from currency if people actually think it's affecting the economy and they have the data to see that, or leave it in and just affect how actual good it is, put a cap or something. Like, they can change the numbers, but I just don't like rarity as a concept in particular in gear and having to build around it. It felt kind of cool in D2, but... I would stack it just for like, I stack it for dopamine. Like I stack it for like, I just want the cool excitement of maybe getting something cool. But instead it's more like I'm printing money is what it feels like.
The thing about it in D2 was that I would just have this one character, which was a Sork, because you had the static spell that removes 1/3 of the boss's HP every time that you cast, and then you do like a firewall to finish him off or something like that. And I would have my one Sork that would just be loaded with Magic Find, because that's all I really needed. And then I would just like teleport to Mephisto, one-shot Mephisto, grab the loot, repeat, infinite. That's kind of like what you would do back in the old day in Diablo 2, which, it's okay because of how fast you could just like get a character online, and I got used to just having that, but it was never something that felt particularly good, because you're just like, well, I just have this one character, does the Magic Find thing. Not a particularly powerful character to do literally anything else, just runs to Mephisto, kills Mephisto, and it's done. And it's just a concept that I personally don't like. I don't like having to mess around with rarity. Right now, my warrior has 100 rarity, which is apparently the point at which you start getting diminishing returns, so I don't want to take it too much higher. But my warrior has easily picked up, I don't know, probably 30 times more exalts than my mercenary did, which is like not even remotely reasonable, because... even though he's further ahead in progression, because now I know more about the game, I probably played both those characters about the similar amount of time.
And GGG, like you said, have stated they don't want players to feel like they have to play a particular type of way, and honestly, it feels like we do at the moment. Like, if you're not running rarity, you are basically gutting your currency progression. Like, that is like a fact. So, because of that, rarity feels mandatory, basically, is what it boils down to. At least in Trade League, like, it definitely feels mandatory, because if you're not printing as much currency, like, you're not going to slam in Trade League. Like, you're going to use your stuff to actually buy. So because of that, it's like, if your main job to pick up was to pick up money on the ground, and you're picking up diamonds and quarters or dimes and quarters, but you had like a necklace you could wear that suddenly makes it $1 and $5 bills, like, you would be stupid not to wear the necklace, right? So, it's that's how it feels. Like, it's basically just upgrading the currency you're printing, and that's effectively mechanically how it works as well. So, yeah, I'm not sure I'm convinced it's a fantastic setup.
So I know we're coming up on the time for you to go stream and stuff. So I just want to ask you one last thing. If you could change one thing about the game right now, like your one suggestion to GGG, what would
Release the druid and blight while you're at it.
you just want to get a new class?
I want a new class, man. I would. I mean, a serious answer I'd love to hear, because they say 6 to 12 months is the timeline for launch. I think a lot of people would love to hear like timelines and things like, okay, what kind of cadence the character progress? Because we can assume, let's say it's 12 months, 6 new characters come in. Okay, every 2 months we should be seeing a new character, which means we're 30 days out from a new character. Would love to hear some timelines on things like leagues. I'd just like to know what to look forward to. Would be, I don't know if that's necessarily a change, but I would like to know what's coming. And in terms of actual changes in the game itself, I would love to see some quality of life related to like animations of maces. I'm pretty firm in my opinion. I think Warrior is one of the first classes made, because when I flew down to test it the first time in a much earlier iteration of the game, there were only 3 classes that were ready to be tested, and it was Ranger, Warrior, and Sorceress. And so Warrior was at least one of the first 3. So and it was the only melee class because it was Ranger and Sorceress. So I think that they had originally a vision of melee of being this slow, lumbering, big hitter. But in its current iteration, it's a slow, lumbering, kind of mid hitter that takes a long time because he's slow and lumbering, but then also falls over very easily and can't get back up. So I think that, if we are sticking to the vision of a slow lumbering warrior, like make all of the AoEs bigger, make them do more damage. If we're going to stick with the same attack speed, sure. Make sure armor actually is a viable defensive layer. Solve the HP issue. I don't know if this is like on armor only gear, adding an implicit that gives you straight up HP or something, because that would make sense to me. I mean, energy shield gets this shit. So, and energy shield is just straight better and has tons of percentages on the tree, and like recharge rate and all this shit. So I don't understand necessarily why HP is literally just a worse energy shield.
The HP implicit is on expert rogue armor, which is the mercenary, the armor evasion hybrid.
Yeah, so you need Dex to even have it.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
I understand that strength gives you HP, so you're supposed to like pseudo get it. Okay, maybe we tweak those numbers. Maybe instead of 2 HP every strength, you get 4.
But then you also run into another problem, which is what I'm running into right now, which is if you're just stacking strength, you don't have mana. Because intelligence gives you mana, right? But that's another thing. Like right now, I'm like, okay, 2 totems and I'm out. And I can cast, I'm supposed to be able to cast 3. So it's like 2 totems, potion, another totem. It's like, it's awkward right now, but yeah.
Yeah, and the strength increase nodes very often will reduce your max mana for some reason. So, that's even on the Atlas tree too. It's like increase your strength by like 7, 12% more damage per strength or whatever, but then you just lose max mana. So, and some of the nodes like domain, like the 2-handed nodes to like do stun build up or more damage, but then just reduce your attack speed by 11%. It's like, what? I don't understand this give or take. It's like, did I level up or not? Like, did I get stronger or not? Like, why? The next node I'm taking is reducing my overall attack speed to do something else. It's like, that's not really I'm trading off is what I'm doing.
I was actually surprised because I started looking at the numbers on skills, and I wasn't really paying too much attention when I first started pathing down the tree, and I was like, oh, this node's got like 50% attack damage. I'm taking that. Also comes with like a combined total of negative 10% attack speed, and then I started looking at the numbers on my totem slam, and I was like, oh, turns out attack speed's pretty important, because otherwise your DPS goes right down the drain. So yeah, I've been re-speccing out of that and putting more attack speed and stuff. Yeah, it's absolutely crazy.
I mean, we don't see this on, the fucking sorcerer. It's like, okay, you do additional projectiles, but now your projectiles do 50% less damage. Like, I mean, they just get straight, they have like trees that actually just are only better. So it's like, we're playing the worst archetype at the moment. And I also have to nerf attack speed, which is honestly one of the most important stats, considering all of the moves are so slow. So it's like, why?
Yeah.
Can it just remove that? Like, it's already fucking slow.
It is weird. Like I said, I jokingly say that they have a hate boner for warrior, but the
For real.
warrior definitely feels like a much weaker archetype than the other ones, which is perfect because, like I said, I'm a Dark Souls player. I enjoy suffering, so there you go. That's definitely the class for me. Go and suffer
Well,
playing warrior, I guess.
there you go. Good luck. Let me know how you experience the. I'm be curious to see as you get to pinnacle bosses how you're feeling about it because, I think totems can probably do it, but it's an interesting experience getting there. So
Yeah.
I had to hammer a god's it in order to make it like at all viable.
I've tried Hammer of Gods, but because I'm stuck with a one-handed mace, it's like doesn't do anything. You can barely tell. Like it's two totem slams is almost the same damage as my Hammer of God. So I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's a shame. But anyway, thank you very much for your time. There's going to be links to DM's channel in the description of this video. Make sure to check him out there and subscribe, bell notification icon, all of that jazz. I'm assuming you're going to be working on a lot more PoE2 content, right?
Yeah, I don't think I'm going anywhere for a minute. So appreciate the invite. It was good chatting with you, and a lovely podcast. It was a good time.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your time. Guys, we'll see you on the next one. If you enjoyed this, hit the like button, subscribe, bell notification icon, all that jazz, and I'll see you next one. Stay strong, stay safe. Peace out.